A mysterious book appears on your desk. It has no title, no author, yet as you flip through its pages, you're stunned. Inside lies knowledge far beyond your time, advanced mathematics, secrets of the universe, concepts centuries ahead of anything you've ever seen. Driven by curiosity, you begin to study it, obsessively, quietly. For years you dive deeper into its symbols, its theories, its impossible insights. You absorb every word, every diagram, until you know it by heart. Eventually, you realize the world must see this, so you publish it. A new edition, fresh ink, on fresh paper. The book spreads, people whisper about it. It becomes legend. Centuries pass. Then one day, a worn copy ends up back on your desk. The same book, the same ideas, the same mystery. So who wrote it? This is the Bootstrap Paradox, a time loop where something exists without ever being created. A book with no author, a song with no composer, a machine with no inventor. Information passed in a perfect circle, emerging from nowhere. In this loop, cause and effect fold in on themselves. You write the book because you found the book, but you found the book because you wrote it. There is no beginning, no origin, just a closed circle of time. Imagine a violinist travels back in time. They teach their younger self to play. That younger version grows up, becomes the same violinist, and travels back again. But if no one outside the loop ever taught them, where did the knowledge come from? It came from nowhere. It simply is. This is what makes the Bootstrap Paradox so disturbing. It suggests something can exist without creation. An object, a person, an idea, free-floating in time, sustained only by the loop that contains it. It defies everything we know about logic, everything we assume about causality, about beginnings and ends. It's like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, an impossible act. And yet, here it is. Science fiction is full of it. A man receives blueprints for a time machine, builds it, and travels back to deliver those same blueprints to his younger self. The loop is complete. The machine exists, but who actually designed it? No one, or everyone, or time itself. And here's the strange part. Physics doesn't completely rule it out. In certain models of time travel, closed causal loops are possible. Events can sustain themselves without any external trigger, like a wheel spinning without a first push. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics even hint that information might persist across time, that under the right conditions, the universe could allow such loops, no beginning, no end, just eternal recurrence. If a book can appear out of nowhere, could the universe itself, could reality be a bootstrap loop, a structure without origin, a cosmos that exists because it exists, turning forever in the paradox of its own becoming? And if that's true, where does that leave free will? If actions are trapped in a loop, if knowledge has no creator, if events just feed themselves forward and backward through time, then who is choosing anything? Maybe we're not authors of our fate. Maybe we're just chapters in a book that writes itself. Or maybe the book never needed an author to begin with, just a loop, just a cycle, just the paradox. You step through the veil of time, not forward, but back. The air feels wrong, softer somehow. You're not just a visitor, you are a variable. A thread from the future tugging at the fabric of the past. Your destination waits quietly. A street corner, a quiet house, a man you've never met, but somehow know. He sits reading a newspaper, unaware. He is your grandfather, and he cannot live. The thought is cold, but the logic is worse. If he survives, your parents are born. You are born, and you come back in time. But if he dies, you are never born. And if you are never born, who pulled the trigger? This is the grandfather paradox. It does not just bend time, it collapses causality. A loop that eats itself, a future that destroys its own past, unraveling everything that once made it real. The beauty of time travel is its symmetry. The horror is the consequence. Every cause demands an effect. Every effect whispers back to its cause. But when one breaks, both collapse. A paradox is not a question. It is a fracture. You stand frozen, not because you doubt what must be done, but because the moment you act, you disappear. And so does the act, a ghost killing its own shadow, only to find nothing left of either. The paradox is elegant in its cruelty. You erase yourself by succeeding, but you also erase the act by erasing yourself, and that means it never happened. So you exist again, to do it again, forever. One solution tries to seal the wound. The Novikov self-consistency principle. It whispers nothing you do in the past can change what already is. You may try to kill him, but fate will block you. A jammed gun, a missed shot, a twist of luck. Time in this view is not fluid. It is fixed. You can observe it, move within it, but never shape it. A sculpture, not a river. You are not a painter. You are only a frame in the gallery. But what if time does flow? What if it branches like a river with infinite forks? Then the paradox dissolves, but only by escaping itself. You do kill your grandfather, but you do not vanish. You simply step into a new world. That world carries the cost. In it, you never existed. Your line ends, but the original timeline, the one you left, still exists, untouched. You haven't broken time. You've multiplied it. The many worlds interpretation welcomes contradiction by creating separation. Every possibility is true, somewhere. Every paradox is avoided by declaring both happened, in different rooms of the same infinite house. But even that offers no comfort, because now there are 1,000 yous. 1,000,000, each one walking a different corridor. Some living, some dying, some watching their grandfathers fade into history they themselves will never reach. Other theories propose the block universe, a model where past, present, and future are already written. Immutable, eternal. You can visit the past, but not touch it. You are a shadow moving through painted light. This solves the paradox by declaring it impossible. The past cannot be changed. The loop cannot form. Time becomes a cathedral of unbroken stained glass, where even your breath cannot disturb the dust. But still, the thought lingers. If time can be touched, can it be torn? And if it can be torn, can it be healed? Or do all changes echo endlessly, splintering reality into chaos without end? In dreams, you stand at the door again. The man reads his paper. The street is still. You raise your hand, and then lower it. Not from mercy, from fear, not for him, for everything. Because time, once bent, may never return to its shape, and the paradox may not be a question at all. It may be a warning, so you return to your own moment, carrying the weight of a choice never made. But even that choice echoes. Even in doing nothing, you have changed something, yourself, and maybe that is the real paradox, that even without action time bends, that by existing, you alter the world, that every second you live is a loop of becoming and unbecoming. In the end, the grandfather paradox does not ask what you would do. It asks who you were before the question was possible, and whether you are still that person, now that you've asked it. You walk into a quiet library, not just any library. This one holds every book that has ever existed, every list, every index, every category, and somewhere inside, a strange question waits. Among the shelves, you find a book. It contains a list of all books that do not list themselves. At first it seems like just another catalog, until you wonder, should this book include itself? If it does, then it shouldn't, because it only lists books that don't list themselves. But if it doesn't, then it fits the rule. So it should be listed. The logic folds in on itself, a loop with no exit. This is Russell's paradox, a riddle not made of riddles, but of logic itself, a quiet detonation that shattered the foundations of mathematics, not with noise, but with contradiction. It began with sets, simple enough, a set of apples, a set of numbers, a set of stars. You can have a set of anything, even a set of sets. And then someone asked, what about the set of all sets that do not contain themselves? Should it contain itself? If it does, it violates its own rule. If it doesn't, then it qualifies and must contain itself. Every path leads to contradiction. The structure caves in. It is not just a puzzle, it is a fracture, a proof that logic, when left to itself, can collapse under its own weight. A snake that eats its tail, only to find the tail is also the snake. Bertrand Russell did not set out to break mathematics, but he found something that was already broken, a crack hidden in the floorboards of thought, a flaw that logic could not explain away. Before Russell, mathematics was a cathedral. Clean lines, solid ground, every theorem built on the last. After Russell, it was a city under fog, every street uncertain, every building haunted. The paradox revealed a terrifying truth, that even our most perfect systems can contain seeds of their own destruction, that inside pure reason, contradictions can quietly breed. Mathematicians responded with new rules, axioms, restrictions, boundaries that told logic where it could and could not go, like fences built after the escape of something wild. But the damage was already done. Gödel followed with his incompleteness theorems, proving that every consistent system is incomplete, that there will always be truths that cannot be proven. And so Russell's paradox became more than a curiosity. It became a scar, a reminder that no system is immune to collapse, that certainty is an illusion we must hold gently, like breath in cold air. In language, the paradox reappears, the sentence that says it is false. The barber who shaves all men who do not shave themselves. Who shaves the barber? In logic, in programming, in philosophy, it waits, a trapdoor under the staircase of thought. A question that answers itself by breaking the questioner. Even in artificial intelligence, the paradox haunts the edges. A system that tries to evaluate itself too deeply risks the same loop, a crash, a freeze, an infinite recursion with no return. So we step carefully now. We build walls around paradoxes, not to solve them, but to keep them from spreading. We know the cost of asking certain questions, but still the question remains. Can a system ever fully describe itself? Can a mind ever grasp its own boundaries without slipping into contradiction? Russell's paradox whispers no. It suggests that some things cannot be both true and complete, that total self-knowledge may be forbidden, not by cruelty, but by structure itself. And maybe that's the real paradox, that the closer we get to knowing everything, the more we risk knowing nothing at all, that inside perfect clarity waits perfect confusion. You leave the library now, the shelves remain, the book still sits there, unreadable, yet complete. A catalogue of the impossible, a mirror with no reflection, a door that cannot open because it has already let you through. A single sentence appears in your mind. It floats there, simple, weightless. It says only this statement is false. You try to understand it. If the statement is false, then it must be true. But if it is true, then it must be false. The thought slips through your fingers. This is the liar paradox. It has no shape, no edges, just a quiet loop that undoes itself the moment you believe it. A snake made of pure contradiction, biting a tail that keeps vanishing. It begins with language, with the idea that every sentence must be true or false, yes or no, light or dark. But the liar says, what if neither? A man says, I am lying, and if he is, then he is telling the truth. But if he tells the truth, then he is lying. The loop begins again. It does not end. At first it seems like a trick, a clever knot of words, but the more you pull, the tighter it gets, the deeper the hole becomes, until you're no longer sure what truth is supposed to feel like. Philosophers have tried to tame it. Some say the sentence is meaningless, others say it belongs in a third category. Not true, not false, just broken, a ghost in the machine. But the ghost is persistent. It slips into systems, into logic, into machines that try to understand themselves. And when it gets in, things begin to collapse. Loops form, certainty dies. The liar paradox is old, ancient even. Eubulides first spoke it in Greece, centuries before the modern world. And still it lives, repeating itself in 1,000 new forms. In the 20th century, it took on new life. Bertrand Russell saw that self-reference was not just a game, it was a threat, a virus that could infect logic itself. From that crack came Gödel. He showed that every system, no matter how perfect, contains statements it cannot prove, that truth, at its deepest core, may always be incomplete. The liar hides there, in the gaps, not as a flaw, but as a feature. A reminder that even our clearest thoughts are built on foundations that shift in the dark. Computers face it too. A program that tries to analyze itself can fall into infinite loops. A statement that says, "I will never halt," may cause a system to freeze forever. The paradox reveals something uncomfortable, that even our minds can become trapped. That thinking about thinking can undo itself. That certainty is not solid ground, but thin ice. Language cannot escape. It is full of mirrors. Sentences that point at themselves, reflect themselves, collapse into themselves. The liar is everywhere. In jokes, in riddles, in laws, we try to patch the system, to rewrite the rules, to keep paradoxes in cages. But they always find the cracks, always return, always whisper, "What if truth itself lies?" And maybe it does. Maybe truth is not a fixed star but a flickering flame, something that can warm or burn or vanish when touched too directly. The liar paradox is not just a sentence, it is a question about knowing, about the limits of thought, about what happens when the mirror stares back. So we learn to be gentle with certainty, to speak carefully, to listen for the loops in our own thinking, to let the liar speak without always needing to answer. Because in the end, the liar teaches us something vital, that even in logic, there is mystery, that even in clarity, there is shadow, and that perhaps the greatest lie of all is the belief that truth is simple. Imagine a hotel with infinite rooms, endless hallways stretching beyond sight. Every room is full, every bed occupied, and yet there is always space for more. This is Hilbert's hotel. A thought experiment built not from bricks or keys, but from infinity itself, a structure that defies every instinct we have about space, limits, and logic. A new guest arrives. At any normal hotel, they would be turned away. No vacancy, but here the manager smiles. He tells every guest to move one room up. Room 1 goes to room 2, 2 to 3, and so on. Now room 1 is free. Just like that, an infinite hotel makes room for one more without losing anything, without running out, because infinity does not behave like anything else. More guests arrive, 1,000, 1,000,000. Still, there is room. The manager shifts each guest to double their room number. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 3 becomes 6. Now every odd-numbered room is open. The pattern continues. No matter how many guests appear, the hotel expands, not by growing, not by building, just by rearranging the infinite that already exists. And then something stranger. An infinite bus arrives, carrying infinite guests. Hilbert's hotel welcomes them all. Because infinity, no matter how full, is never truly full. It breaks our understanding. We think of full as final, complete. But in Hilbert's world, fullness has no edge. It stretches, bends, becomes something unrecognizable. The mind resists. How can something be infinite, yet still have room to grow? How can it be complete, and also incomplete, at the same time? This is the paradox of actual infinity. Not just potential, like counting forever, but real, present infinity. The kind you can check into, sleep in, wander through. David Hilbert created it to show how strange mathematics becomes when infinity is treated as a real quantity. A number without bounds, but with rules of its own. In Hilbert's hotel, subtraction and addition lose their meaning. Remove all the even-numbered guests, and half the hotel is empty. Yet still, the hotel is infinite. Remove all but one room, and you still have an infinite number of guests remaining. A place where subtraction changes everything, and nothing, all at once. The hotel is more than a trick. It is a mirror held up to our assumptions. A reminder that math is not always intuitive, that logic can twist into wonder. Physicists feel its presence too, in theories of the multiverse, in models of eternal inflation, in questions about whether the universe is finite, or infinite, or something stranger still. If space is infinite, does it behave like Hilbert's hotel? Can you add stars, galaxies, entire realities, without changing the total? Can something always be larger, even when it is already endless? And if time itself is infinite, are we trapped in one room of a much larger hotel? Will we ever know how far the hallway goes? The paradox offers no answers. It only deepens the mystery. The longer you think about it, the more the walls of understanding begin to melt. Hilbert's hotel does not break the rules, it just plays a different game. A game where infinity is not a concept, but a location. A place where you can check in forever, where no one is turned away, where the bell rings endlessly, echoing through halls that never end. And maybe that is the point, to remind us that not everything must make sense to be real, that sometimes logic lives best on the edge of absurdity. So if you ever find yourself wandering strange corridors in your dreams, do not be afraid. You are not lost, you are just spending the night in Hilbert's hotel. You hold a perfect sphere in your hands, smooth, seamless, silent. It rests in space, calm and complete. A single, unified object, and then someone tells you you can break it into pieces and make two identical spheres. No shrinking, no stretching, no extra material, just two. This is the Banach, Tarski paradox. It is not magic, it is mathematics. A proof born not from illusions, but from the cold precision of set theory, and it tears reality apart. You begin with 5 pieces, that is all you need. 5 invisible, abstract fragments carved from the original sphere, not by knife or saw, but by concept. Each piece is impossibly complex, not like slices of cake, but like shattered reflections of infinite mirrors. They are non-measurable, undefined by volume, shapes that can exist in theory, but not in space. Now rearrange them, gently, carefully. Each fragment spins, shifts, reassembles, and when they come together again, there are 2 perfect spheres, as real as the one you started with. The same size, the same shape, 2 from 1. Creation without cost, multiplication without matter. A duplicate born from nothing but rearrangement. This is not a trick, it is a consequence of the axiom of choice, a rule in mathematics that allows you to select elements from infinite sets without a clear pattern. A rule that unlocks the impossible, but in unlocking it, something else is broken. Because if this paradox were physically true, the world would collapse, matter would not be conserved, energy would be infinite, objects could multiply endlessly. Luckily, reality resists. Atoms cannot be split into infinite detail. Space cannot be carved into non-measurable sets. The paradox lives only in the world of perfect abstractions. Yet the fact remains. The logic is sound, the math is solid, and that leads to a quiet dread. If our mathematical models describe the world, how can they also contradict it? Is there a deeper layer beneath physics, one where the impossible is routine? Is the universe finite in its resistance, or is it hiding infinities too strange for particles to reveal? Some try to dismiss the paradox as an artifact, a glitch in a model too far from the ground. But even if it's only theoretical, the question echoes, what else might be hiding in pure thought? In the world of Banach and Tarski, infinity does not stretch endlessly. It folds, bends, fractures. It makes copies of itself like reflections in a mirror that reflect more than light. You begin to wonder if matter is more fragile than it appears, if space itself is stitched together by assumptions, and if those assumptions fray, what else might unravel? The paradox asks not whether duplication is possible, but whether reality is as solid as it feels, whether unity is real, or just a shape waiting to split. If the universe were a sphere, could it be taken apart this way? Could a single cosmos become 2, and those become 4, and those become infinite? And if so, Have we already been split? Are we living inside one of many copies, unaware of the rearrangement that made us? Banach and Tarski does not give answers. It gives disturbance, a quiet question that curls at the edge of understanding, refusing to settle. You close your hand around the sphere again. It feels whole, stable, but now you know the truth. In the shadows of logic, it is already dividing. One becomes two, two become many, and nothing is lost. Only reassembled, again and again behind the veil of what we think we know. A prisoner waits in silence. The walls are bare, the air still, days pass like shadows. Then one morning, the warden arrives with a message that changes everything. You will be executed next week, he says. It will happen on a weekday, at noon. But the catch is this, it will be a surprise. The prisoner nods. He listens, but as the footsteps fade down the hall, his mind begins to turn. He is not afraid. He is a man of logic, and logic, he believes, can outwit fate. He begins with Friday. If he is still alive by Thursday night, the hanging must be Friday. But then it wouldn't be a surprise. He would expect it. So Friday is impossible. Then Thursday. But if Friday is gone, and he is still alive on Wednesday night, then Thursday becomes predictable too. So Thursday must be ruled out as well. He continues, step by step. Wednesday, then Tuesday, then Monday. Each day eliminated by reasoning alone, until there is nothing left. No day remains. The execution, he decides, cannot happen. He smiles, certain now. Logic has saved him. He lies back on the prison cot, thinking himself free. A victory earned, without lifting a hand. And then Wednesday arrives. At noon, the guards appear. The hanging takes place.
He is stunned.
Not by the rope, but by the realization that everything he believed has crumbled. This is the paradox of the unexpected hanging. A riddle dressed in certainty. A trap laid by logic itself. The prisoner thought he could reason his way out of death, but his confidence became the very tool of surprise. The more he believed the hanging could not happen, the more completely it caught him off guard. It is not just a trick of language, it is a collapse of assumption, a crack in the foundation of expectation. Where knowing too much makes knowledge useless. In classrooms, the paradox appears again. A teacher announces a surprise test next week. The students try to predict it. They use the same reasoning, and they are just as wrong. Because the paradox is not about death or exams. It is about belief, about how certainty can blind us, about how thinking we have ruled something out makes us unable to see it when it comes. The deeper truth is this: the mind does not like surprises. It builds walls of logic to protect itself. But those walls can trap us just as easily as they shield us. The execution was never postponed. The test was never canceled. Only the illusion of control was broken. And that illusion is often the last thing we let go of. The paradox whispers that unpredictability has power. That even in a system of perfect reason, there are moments that cannot be caught. Moments that slip past every calculation. It asks a difficult question. Can surprise and certainty exist together, or must one always dissolve when the other arrives? And it suggests something darker, that our most careful thoughts might be what misleads us. That doubt may be closer to truth than logic ever dares to admit. So the prisoner falls, not because of the noose, but because of the weight of his own reasoning. The rope was already tied in his thoughts long before it reached his neck. And as you lie awake or drift towards sleep, the question lingers, what else might we have ruled out, that still waits just around the corner? Not with cruelty, not with vengeance, just with perfect patient surprise. You stand at the edge of a quiet path. 10 steps lie before you, simple, straight. You take the first step, then pause. A voice whispers from the past, before you reach the end, you must first reach halfway. So you take half the distance, then half of what remains, then half again, and again. Each step smaller than the last, but the halfway point never disappears. It multiplies, fractures, fills the space with infinities. This is the heart of Zeno's paradoxes, thought experiments from ancient Greece that unravel the very idea of motion, not with force, but with logic. Zeno claimed movement was an illusion, that distance could be divided forever, that no object ever truly arrives, because something must always come first. He told the story of Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles, swift and strong, gives the tortoise a head start, then begins the chase. But by the time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise began, the tortoise has moved a little farther. When he reaches that point, the tortoise has moved again, always slightly ahead. Each time the gap shrinks, but it never vanishes. Zeno asks, how can Achilles ever pass the tortoise if there are infinite points between them? Another version. A flying arrow. At any single moment in time, the arrow occupies one space frozen. Still, if every moment is motionless, how does movement ever emerge? Zeno did not offer solutions, only questions. And for centuries, those questions haunted philosophers and mathematicians alike. Because we know Achilles overtakes the tortoise, we watch arrows fly, we cross rooms, finish marathons, move from one breath to the next. So what went wrong? For a long time, no one knew. The paradoxes felt like tricks, beautiful, frustrating, inescapable. The answer came much later, not from poets, but from mathematicians. Newton, Leibniz, calculus, the concept of limits. They showed that infinite steps can still add up to a finite journey, that the sum of endless fractions can equal a whole, that motion is not destroyed by division, only hidden within it. But even now, the paradox lingers. It asks whether time is smooth or made of moments, whether space is continuous or built from indivisible pieces. Quantum mechanics adds fuel to the fire. Some theories suggest the universe is not infinite in its divisions, that it is pixelated, a cosmic grid of smallest units. If that is true, then Zeno was not wrong. He was just ahead of his time, seeing the cracks in the illusion of flow before we had the tools to measure them. And even if motion works, the questions remain. What does it mean to move? Are we gliding across space or stepping between stillness? When you walk across a room, are you truly moving, or simply arriving at the next frame in a film the universe is already playing? Zeno's paradoxes do not stop your steps, but they unsettle the ground beneath them. They ask you to look closer, to wonder what lies between the moments you think are solid. So tonight, as your breath rises and falls, as your thoughts drift forward and pause, remember Zeno, remember the halfway points, the endless divisions, the journey that never begins, yet always ends. A sealed box sits in a quiet room. Inside it, a cat waits, or perhaps it doesn't. You cannot see inside. You cannot hear a sound, and yet everything depends on what is happening within. There is more than a cat in the box. There is a device, a particle, a vial of poison, a clock ticking softly in the realm of probability. One event triggers another, a quantum game of chance with life on the line. If a single atom decays, it sets off a chain. The vial breaks, the poison releases, the cat dies, but if the atom remains stable, the cat lives. And until the box is opened, both possibilities coexist. This is Schrödinger's cat, a paradox at the heart of quantum mechanics, a creature suspended in superposition, not alive, not dead, but both simultaneously. Until observed, it is not about cruelty. It is not about cats. It is about reality. And whether it exists without us watching, whether events unfold in silence or only come into being when seen. In the quantum world, particles do not have definite states. They are waves of probability, descriptions of what might be, not what is. They exist in clouds, in fuzz, in potentials. Only when measured do they collapse, resolve, choose a form. Before that, they hover in limbo, undefined, half-present, waiting for a question to shape them into an answer. The cat, then, becomes a symbol, a living metaphor for uncertainty, for the blurred edge where logic falters, for a world that resists being pinned down. If you never look inside the box, What is the cat? A thought, a spectrum, a story with two endings layered on top of each other. Open the box, and the wave collapses. The cat lives, or the cat dies. One path becomes real, the other disappears, or perhaps continues elsewhere, in another thread of time, in another version of the world. Some say this is absurd, that a cat cannot be both dead and alive, that quantum rules should not apply to living things. But the boundary between the small and the large is not so clear. At what point does probability become reality? When does uncertainty harden into fact? And what role do we play in making it happen? The paradox forces us to consider the act of observation. Are we passive viewers, or participants shaping the outcome? If looking changes the world, then what are we really seeing? Some interpretations go further. Many worlds, every outcome splits the universe. In one, the cat survives. In another, it does not. Both exist, you only follow one. In that view, the box contains not one cat, but 1,000, 1,000,000,000, all outcomes branching like roots beneath a forest floor. Silent, hidden, alive in parallel. And if that is true, then choice is no longer a fork in the road. It is a river with infinite branches, each taken, each real, each unreachable from the others. Schrödinger's cat does not answer questions. It replaces them with mirrors. It reflects our desire for certainty against a universe that offers none. So we build boxes, we peer inside, and each time we do, we change what we find, not because we are powerful, but because the world is strange. Tonight, as your mind drifts, remember the cat in the box, not dead, not alive, just waiting. Like the future, like a dream, like a thought that has not yet been observed. You sit at a table with two envelopes in front of you, identical in shape, weight, and texture. One of them holds a sum of money. The other holds twice that amount. That is all you know. You are told to choose one, and you do. The envelope feels no different in your hands. Sealed. Mysterious. You wonder what's inside. Maybe it's $10. Maybe 100. Maybe much more. But then the question creeps in, quiet and unsettling. Should you switch? You reason through it. Suppose your envelope holds X dollars, then the other must hold either X divided by 2 or X multiplied by 2. So if you switch, you might gain or lose. But how much? You calculate. Half the time, switching will give you X divided by 2. Half the time, it will give you 2X. The expected value of switching seems to be 1.25x. That's more than you have now. So you switch. But wait, now you're holding the other envelope. The same logic applies. This envelope could still be the smaller or the larger. Again, the math says you should switch. Again, it says the expected value is higher, so you should switch back. But then the loop begins. No matter which envelope you hold, the reasoning tells you to switch over and over. A cycle with no rest, a paradox built from perfect logic and a whisper of uncertainty. This is the two envelopes problem. A riddle not of false steps, but of steps that never stop. It asks not which envelope holds more, but whether any decision can stand still when thought itself keeps moving. You try to anchor the paradox with real numbers. Maybe the envelope holds $20. Then the other must hold $10 or $40. Now the math feels different. The spell seems to break, but even then, something lingers. A shadow in the logic, a sense that no matter how concrete the numbers, the trap remains. You're still caught in the loop, still unsure, still tempted to switch. Some say the paradox only works because we assign probabilities where none exist, that the expectation is a trick of assumptions, that the error lies not in the math, but in the meaning we give to the unknown. Others say the paradox reveals a deeper truth, that value is not fixed but shaped by what we believe, that even certainty can be undone by too much thinking, that choice can eat itself. There is beauty in the contradiction. Two envelopes, one fact, infinite indecision. A single moment stretched into forever by the mind's hunger to know what cannot be known. It is not about money, It never was. It is about doubt, about the fragility of choice when reason spirals beyond its limits, about the stillness that thought cannot hold. You try to stop, to settle, to open one envelope and be done, but the whisper returns. What if the other held more? What if you walked away too soon? In life too we hold envelopes we cannot open. Relationships, decisions, memories. We weigh them, wonder, worry, should we stay, should we leave, should we switch, and even if we choose, the question follows. Would the other path have been better? Would the other life have been richer? Did we pick the smaller envelope? The two envelopes problem is not a trick. It is a mirror. It shows us how we think, how we doubt, how we reach for more, even when we do not know what more means. And in the quiet of night, when the world slows, we are all sitting at that table. Two choices, one truth, a loop that folds back on itself, soft and endless. The question is not which envelope holds more. The question is whether we can ever stop wondering. One grain of sand lies alone on a vast table. It is not a heap. No one would call it that. Add a second grain. Still, nothing changes. 2 grains do not make a pile. The table remains nearly empty. The sand is barely noticeable. You keep going. A third grain. Then a fourth. Still, not a heap. Grain after grain, the mound grows, yet the name never arrives. At some point, you know it will be a heap. But when, what number makes the shift real? You now reverse the process. Start with a visible pile of sand, clear and unquestionable. Remove 1 grain. It's still a heap. Another grain disappears. Still a heap. 1 more. Still, the pile thins quietly, but remains. When does it stop being what it was? The paradox of the heap invites us into the fog of vagueness, a place where categories blur and definitions stretch until they snap. A boundary that hides from view, no matter how close you look. How many grains make a heap? 10, 50, 1,000? Is there a line, sharp and final, or just a slow dissolve where certainty slips away grain by grain? Language wants to label things. It needs boundaries. This is a heap. That is not. But the universe doesn't care for our labels. It flows, it fades, it blends. No hard edges, just gradients and drift. It's not about sand. It never is. The paradox asks something deeper. When does change become real? If you change slowly enough, do you change at all? When does a child become an adult? When does someone go bald? 1 hair at a time, 1 moment at a time, the line stays invisible. Yet somehow we believe it's there. We live by categories, heap or not, person or not, conscious or not, alive or not. But what if all our categories are shadows on a wall, drawn by a mind desperate to organize what cannot be contained? Imagine a chair. You remove 1 screw. Still a chair. Another screw. Still a chair. Eventually it's just parts scattered on the floor. But which screw made it cross the line? The Sorites paradox doesn't scream. It whispers. It gently asks whether anything we name is truly solid, whether identity is real, or a story told over time, 1 grain at a time. Some try to solve it with numbers. They speak of thresholds, of critical points, but even those are guesses dressed in logic. Deep down we know the truth. The world isn't built for binary answers. Instead of yes or no, the paradox offers maybes, a cloud of possibilities. Not a line, but a zone. Not a switch, but a slow, silent fade into something else. You are not the same person you were yesterday, or last year, or 10 years ago. But at what moment did you become different? Can you name it? Can you point to it? If every cell in your body is replaced over time, are you still you? Is there a core that remains, or just a pattern held together by habit and hope? The paradox touches everything: memory, identity, law, morality. How many lies make a liar? How many crimes make a criminal? How much silence makes someone complicit? We want certainty, but the world gives us gradation. We want definitions, but the truth comes in whispers and smudges. Grain by grain, the boundaries slip through our fingers. The heap was never about sand, it was about us. about the fragile scaffolding we build to hold the world still long enough to name it. But the world keeps moving, and so we ask again, is it a heap? Is it still a heap? When did it become? When did it stop? The question loops, soft and endless as the night drifts on. Sleep, too, is a kind of fading. Not one moment, but many. Not a leap, but a slide. One thought less, one breath slower, one grain closer to the heap of dreams. You walk into a room with two boxes waiting on a pedestal. One is transparent. You can see inside. It holds $1,000. The other is opaque, sealed, mysterious. You're told it contains either nothing or $1 million. You can take both boxes or just the opaque one. There's a catch, of course, always a catch. A being, perhaps a machine, perhaps a god, has already predicted what you will choose. And if it predicted you'd take only the opaque box, it placed the million inside. If it predicted you'd take both, it left the opaque one empty. You stare at the boxes, frozen in time. The prediction has already been made. The money or the absence of it is already there. Your choice cannot change the past, and yet, somehow, it matters. If the predictor is perfect and you take both boxes, the opaque one is empty. You walk away with only the visible 1,000, but if you take only the opaque one, you walk away with $1 million. So which do you choose? It feels like free will against fate, logic against intuition. If the future is already predicted, then your freedom is an illusion. But if you still have a choice, how can the prediction be so accurate? Some say take both. After all, the money is already there. Nothing you do now will change it. Taking both guarantees at least something. Why leave the 1,000 on the table? But others say no. Trust the predictor. If it's always right, then choosing just the opaque box must mean there's $1 million waiting. Take only one, and you gain more by seeming to do less. And so the mind loops. One path feels rational, the other feels magical. One clings to causality. The other whispers of strange symmetries between thought and outcome, between belief and reality. This is Newcomb's paradox, a test of decision, prediction, and the strange feedback loop between mind and universe. It doesn't ask what you want. It asks what kind of world you think you live in. Is the future already written, or does your choice ripple backward in time, reshaping what came before? Can predictions influence outcomes simply by being believed? You begin to wonder about the predictor. Who or what could know your choice before you make it? Does it simulate your mind? Does it run your decision 1 million times before you ever walk into the room? And if it knows you better than you know yourself, then are you still the one deciding? Or are you following a script you never wrote, chasing an illusion of choice? Some philosophers argue that causality need not flow in only one direction, that time at its deepest level might allow feedback, the future whispering to the past, outcomes selecting their own beginnings. Others reject the paradox entirely. They say it's a trap made from words, a mistake in reasoning, a contradiction dressed as a dilemma, but even they can't agree on where the mistake lies. The paradox doesn't resolve. It lingers, it haunts, it curls into the soft folds of your mind, asking not for an answer but for contemplation. Would you choose one box or both? And more than that, what does your choice say about how you see the world? Do you trust in logic, in certainty, or do you believe, deep down, that the universe rewards trust, even when reason protests? Each box becomes a mirror. One shows you the known, the safe, the calculated gain. The other hides its secret behind belief. To open it is to leap, to trust something unseen. In the quiet, as your breath slows and the edges of thought begin to blur, the paradox remains. Not a problem to solve, but a question to sleep beside. One box or two, certainty or faith, calculation or surrender. The room fades, the pedestal vanishes, but the choice remains, echoing softly, like a dream you almost understand. You step outside on a clear night. The stars blink overhead, scattered like seeds across a black field. Some are close, most are ancient. Each one could hold worlds. Each world could hold life. You stare upward and wonder, not for the first time, where is everybody? This is the Fermi Paradox, the silence between stars. The contradiction between what should be and what is. The universe is vast, time is long, life, in theory, should be common. And yet, nothing. There are over 100 billion galaxies. Each galaxy holds hundreds of billions of stars. Around those stars, countless planets spin. Many of them, statistically, could support life, intelligent life, civilizations, empires, dreams. So why have we heard nothing? No signals, no beacons, no ships gliding through our skies. Just the quiet hum of cosmic background radiation and the low whisper of our own transmissions echoing outward. Enrico Fermi asked the question simply, at lunch one day, if the universe is so full of potential, where is everyone? Some say they're already here, hidden, watching, that advanced civilizations might choose not to reveal themselves, like naturalists in the forest, careful not to disturb the animals they study. Others say we're early, that life takes time. Perhaps the stars are still waking up. Perhaps we are among the first voices to rise in a long, dark symphony. Or maybe life is common, but intelligence is rare. Evolution favors survival, not curiosity. The leap from simple cells to conscious beings may be steep, fragile, and easily undone. Some wonder if intelligent civilizations burn brightly and briefly, that technological power outpaces wisdom, that most societies do not survive long enough to cross the stars. There's the idea of the great filter, a wall that life hits. Somewhere between dust and deep space, something stops it. We do not know if we've passed that wall, or if it still lies ahead. If the filter is behind us, we are lucky, miraculous, alone, but survivors. If it lies ahead, then every quiet star becomes a warning, every silent world a tomb. Maybe communication is impossible. Maybe advanced beings don't use radio. Maybe they speak in ways we cannot hear. Light curves, quantum pulses, dimensions folded like paper cranes. Or maybe they're not interested in us at all. We might be too small, too primitive, too noisy, a planet of insects screaming into the void, unaware of the giants who have already moved on. Then again, perhaps we're the only ones. Not just the first, the only spark in the cosmic dark. A lonely flicker in a sea of endless night. If that's true, the silence is not a warning. It's a burden. The responsibility of being the sole voice in an empty theater. The only storytellers in the universe. The paradox does not demand an answer. It just sits there, beneath every night sky, humming softly in the background of thought. You look up again. The stars are still there, unmoving, unblinking. And yet your mind begins to fill them with possibilities. Ships made of light. Civilizations lost to time. Oceans under alien suns. The silence is not empty. It's alive with questions, each one heavier than the last. What if we are not alone? What if we are? Which answer is more terrifying? The Fermi Paradox does not scream. It does not beg. It whispers. A soft, persistent riddle etched into the blackness above us. And as sleep comes, as your breath slows and the sky becomes dreamlike, the stars remain. Watching, waiting, quiet as ever, quiet as always. Maybe the silence is the answer. Or maybe it's just the beginning of the question. Two twins are born on the same day. They laugh together, dream together, grow together. One of them stays on Earth. The other boards a ship and leaves, not just far but fast. So fast that time itself bends around them. The ship moves close to the speed of light. Days stretch. Clocks slow. Inside the ship, everything feels normal, but from Earth, it looks different. The twin who left appears to move through time like honey, slower, thicker, quieter. Years pass. The Earth twin grows older. Wrinkles bloom. Hair fades. Seasons come and go like breaths. But the traveling twin barely ages. Time trickles for them. Their clock ticks softly, as if the universe were whispering. And then one day the ship returns. The twins meet again. But something strange has happened. They are no longer the same age. One has lived decades, the other only years. They were born together, but now they stand apart. One young, one old. This is the twin paradox, a riddle of time and motion, born from Einstein's theory of relativity. It tells us that time is not fixed. It bends, it stretches, it slows down depending on how fast you move and where you go. From the Earth twins' point of view, the sibling left and returned, barely aged. From the traveling twins' point of view, Earth rushed forward like a film in fast motion. Both are right. Both are true. It feels like a contradiction. A paradox. How can time flow differently for two people who shared a beginning? How can two truths exist at once? The answer lies in relativity, in the strange geometry of space and time. When you move through space, you move differently through time. Distance and duration become partners in a dance you cannot see. But it goes deeper. The paradox forces us to let go of time as an absolute. There is no single now, no universal clock ticking for all. Every moment is local. Every second is personal. Time becomes elastic, shaped by speed, by gravity, by motion. Even your heartbeat is affected, ever so slightly, by how fast you travel, or how deep you fall into a gravity well. So the twins are both right. The journey wasn't symmetrical. One stayed still, the other turned, accelerated, changed direction. The ship bent the rules, and time answered in kind. This isn't just theory, it's been tested. Astronauts age slightly slower than those on Earth. Atomic clocks flown around the planet tick just a little differently. The universe whispers these truths in small, steady experiments, but the paradox still stirs something ancient, something emotional. Two lives that began together, separated by speed, reunited by the strange shape of time. Not a story of science, but of love, distance, and return. Imagine saying goodbye to someone, knowing they will return younger than you, that you will grow old while they drift through a slower current. That time will not treat you the same. It makes you wonder what time really is. Not just a measure but a texture, a fabric that wraps around motion, pulls against gravity, and changes shape depending on where you go. And in the quiet of night, when you feel the stillness of your bed, you might wonder if time is passing at the same rate everywhere, or if somewhere out there, another version of you moves slower, untouched by the ticking of this world. The twin paradox doesn't ask you to solve it. It asks you to feel it, to imagine the stretch, to see time not as a river, but as a web, woven with motion, stitched with light. And as sleep takes you, gently, slowly, like a ship approaching the edge of starlight, the question lingers. What is time really, if not the space between two twins, moving apart and meeting again? A ship rests in the harbor, weathered by time, yet proud. It is the Ship of Theseus, they say. Heroes once sailed it, myths were born on its decks. But as years passed, the wooden planks began to rot. One by one, they were replaced. A mast here, a beam there. Slowly, silently, the ship changed. Yet it never stopped being the Ship of Theseus. Tourists came to see it. Sailors repaired it. Children traced its rails, whispering old stories into the sea breeze. The ship remained, even as its body became new. Eventually, not a single original piece remained. Every board, every nail, every inch had been swapped, and still, no one questioned its name. It was the same ship, wasn't it? Or was it something else, wearing an old title? Now imagine this. Each discarded piece was saved, collected, catalogued, preserved. Somewhere quietly, they were reassembled. Slowly, carefully, the original ship came back into being. Every plank returned to its place. Now there are two ships, one built piece by piece over time, the other restored from memory and dust. One never left the harbor. The other is made entirely of the parts that once touched the wind and waves of legend. So which one is the real Ship of Theseus? Is it the one that changed gradually, never breaking its story, or the one made of ancient wood, brought back from the dead? Can two things hold the same identity? Or does it shatter like glass the moment it's duplicated? We ask the same of ourselves. Your body replaces its cells constantly. Every few years nearly all of you is new. Skin, blood, even bones, rebuilt in silence. Yet you still call yourself you. The same mind, the same soul. But what exactly stays the same? Is it memory, a thread of thought that stitches days together, or something more elusive, a pattern, a rhythm, a presence that floats just behind the eyes? What happens if those memories fade? What if your body remains, but your story disappears? Are you still you, or just a ship without a name? And what of machines? If an AI is updated, code rewritten, hardware replaced, when does it become something else? Or does continuity live not in parts but in purpose? A company too can change hands, rebrand, move across oceans. Yet the logo persists, the mission continues. But is it the same company, or just a name wrapped around something new? The paradox stretches beyond philosophy. It whispers through relationships. If a person changes, little by little over years, do we still know them? Or do we cling to the memory of who they were? Sometimes, the hardest part of life is not losing someone suddenly, but watching them change slowly. Watching the pieces drift until one day, you realize the ship has become something else. Yet maybe identity is not a fixed thing, not a relic to preserve. Maybe it's a flame, passed from wick to wick, always burning, always moving. Never the same twice, yet never fully lost. Maybe the Ship of Theseus was never a question of truth, but of belief, of which story we choose to follow, of which ship we're willing to call home. And in the end, both ships float, both hold the sea, both carry echoes of what once was. Perhaps identity is not one answer, but many shadows cast by the same light. So as you drift into sleep, imagine yourself as a ship, changing, piece by piece, growing, becoming. Never quite the same, never quite different, and ask softly, as the waves rock you toward dreams, who have you been? Who are you now? And who might you become? Piece by piece, tomorrow. In a quiet village there lives a barber. He is well-liked, precise, dependable. He keeps the townspeople tidy, their beards trimmed, their faces smooth. But there is a strange rule in this village, and it shapes everything the barber does. The rule is simple. The barber shaves everyone in the village who does not shave themselves. No more, no less. He never breaks it. He is bound to it. A perfect rhythm, a clean divide between those who reach for the razor and those who wait. At first it seems straightforward, a tidy system, a helpful service. But then the question appears, like a wrinkle in smooth linen. The question that breaks the silence: who shaves the barber? If he shaves himself, then by the rule, he must not. He only shaves those who do not shave themselves. But if he does not shave himself, then he must, because he shaves everyone who does not. So which is it? This is the Barber Paradox, a logical knot that tightens the more you pull. A self-reference loop with no beginning and no end. It doesn't just confuse, it collapses. It sounds like a riddle, a simple village tale, but it cracked the foundation of mathematics and logic. Bertrand Russell found it while trying to understand sets. It wasn't a joke, it was a fire alarm. Because the moment you allow a system to refer to itself, contradictions crawl in. The system turns inward, bites its own tail. The rules bend, snap, vanish. The barber's not real, but the problem is, it haunts computer science, language, philosophy, anywhere we try to define things cleanly, completely, from within. Can a law govern all laws, including itself? Can a dictionary define every word, including the word dictionary? Can thought fully understand thought? The Barber Paradox is not about shaving. It's about boundaries, about how systems that try to contain everything eventually burst at the seams, about the limits of self-reference. We like clean answers, clear categories, but the paradox tells us some questions are shaped like mirrors. No matter how you look at them, they turn back on themselves. You can try to escape, say the barber doesn't live in the village, or that the rule is broken. But then you've changed the world just to avoid the contradiction. You've stepped out of the paradox, not solved it, and yet this is what thought does. It finds edges, folds them, creates puzzles out of breath. The barber becomes more than a man. He becomes a threshold, a point where logic fades into mystery. In a way, we are all the barber, caught between roles, between what we are and what we are to ourselves. We try to step outside our own minds, to see clearly, but the view is always tinted by the self that sees. And in that looping question, who shaves the barber, we hear echoes of deeper doubts. Who watches the watcher? Who judges the judge? Who creates the creator? Maybe the answer is not to answer. Maybe it is enough to sit with the paradox, let it hum softly in the background of thought, like the low buzz of a razor left running. Sleep comes slowly, like a blade gliding over skin, careful, smooth, quiet, and the barber is still there, in his little shop, caught in a question with no end. Not waiting for an answer, just existing inside the riddle, shaving shadows, holding silence. A mirror, shaving itself forever. You stand beneath the bright lights of a strange game show. 3 doors loom ahead, each identical, each hiding something unknown. Behind one of them waits a car. Behind the other 2, goats. You choose a door, you point. The audience holds its breath. But the host, Monty Hall, does something curious. He doesn't open your door. Instead, he opens one of the other 2, revealing a goat. Not randomly. He always reveals a goat. Always chooses one of the losing doors. Carefully, knowingly. And now he turns to you, smiling. Would you like to switch your choice? It feels like a trick. Your instincts hesitate. 2 doors remain. One hides a car. One hides nothing. 50-50. Your mind whispers. Switching seems pointless, but something deeper stirs. A tension, a fracture in common sense. The truth is harder to see. If you stay, your chance of winning is 1 in 3. But if you switch, your odds become 2 in 3. A silent doubling, a hidden advantage, waiting in the folds of probability. How can that be? You chose blindly at first, 1 in 3. That never changed. But Monty's action, revealing a goat, did change the landscape. He filtered the future, shifted the weight, gave you a chance to escape your first mistake. Staying means betting that you chose correctly the first time. Switching means betting that you didn't. And since most guesses are wrong, switching becomes wiser, not certain, just better. But the mind resists. It wants symmetry, balance. It does not like being told that something so even can still be uneven. It does not like a world where choice and chance bend logic into spirals. This is the Monty Hall problem, a paradox of probability, a riddle not of deception, but of clarity, buried under instinct and noise. It has been tested, simulated, proven again and again. Still, it sparks arguments, doubt, disbelief, even among mathematicians, even among minds trained to see through illusion. Because the paradox is not in the numbers, it is in us. We cling to first choices, we grow attached. The door becomes familiar, it becomes ours. Switching feels like betrayal, like defeat, like giving up on a path we already claimed. But the paradox reminds us that information changes everything, that what feels fair may not be smart, that the best decisions sometimes feel like mistakes at first, and isn't life like that? We walk through doors, we make choices, we receive new information. Sometimes we get a glimpse of the goat behind the next curtain. Sometimes we get a second chance, but we have to let go of pride, of comfort, of our attachment to being right the first time. We have to be willing to switch, to choose again, to trust the math, not the feeling. The Monty Hall problem is not about goats or cars, it is about belief. About how easily we trust our intuition, even when the truth lies just one step away. So as sleep begins to drift in, soft and slow, imagine the 3 doors, one open, one waiting, one already chosen. The host watching, patient, eternal. Would you switch, not just here, but in life, in memory, in paths you thought were fixed? The paradox doesn't demand an answer, only a pause, a moment to wonder what lies behind the next door, and whether you're ready to reach for it. A man stands at the edge of a forest. He seeks something hidden, something unknown, but he does not know what it looks like or where to find it. Still, he steps forward. This is the beginning of a question, a journey with no map. This is Meno's paradox, also called the paradox of inquiry. It asks a question so quiet, so simple, that it almost disappears. If you know what you're looking for, inquiry is unnecessary. But if you don't, how would you even begin? How can you search for something when you don't know what it is? How can you recognize an answer you cannot imagine? The mind circles itself, unsure where to land. If you already know the answer, there is no need to ask. If you don't know the answer, how would you know it when it comes? Inquiry seems impossible. And yet, we learn, somehow we stumble into understanding. We ask questions we don't fully grasp, and answers arrive like birds returning in spring. Uninvited, unexpected, familiar in a way we cannot explain. Plato offered a solution. He said all knowledge is remembrance, that the soul recalls what it once knew before birth, that asking is not discovery, but awakening. A slow remembering of truth, but whether you believe that or not, the paradox still holds its shape. We are always searching in partial darkness, guided by hints, intuition, fragments of something we hope to make whole. A child asks what light is, without knowing what electricity means. A scientist reaches for particles that cannot be seen. A poet names feelings with words that do not yet exist. We begin not with certainty, but with longing. Not with knowledge, but with wonder. The question grows from within, not as a gap, but as a pull. And somehow, from that tension direction forms. We reach, we stumble, we guess, and in doing so we get closer to something we couldn't describe before we found it. Inquiry, then, is not about what we know or don't know. It's about faith. The quiet faith that truth can be approached, even if it cannot be named. The paradox reminds us that knowing and not knowing are not opposites, they are companions. One shapes the other, one gives the other meaning. Even now, as you lie in the dark, your thoughts drift through questions you haven't formed yet. You are seeking without knowing what you seek. And that's not a flaw. It's the foundation of learning, of philosophy, of being human. We are creatures of questions, shaped more by the asking than the answer. You do not need to know the end to take the first step. You do not need to see the shape of the truth to walk toward it. And so the forest is no longer empty. It is filled with paths you do not yet see. Each step a sentence, each pause a possibility. The paradox of inquiry does not block the road. It reveals the beauty of the road itself. A search with no guarantee. A journey not toward answers but toward deeper questions. And as you fall into sleep, let your mind wander not toward knowing, but toward wondering. Let each breath be a quiet question. Let each dream be its own reply. You walk outside at night. The world is quiet, wrapped in stillness. Above you, the stars stretch forever. Distant lights scattered across a velvet sky, but something feels strange. Something too quiet, too dark. You look up and ask the question that has no easy answer. Why is the night sky dark? Olbers Paradox begins with this simple puzzle. If the universe is infinite, eternal, and filled evenly with stars, then every line of sight should end in starlight. The sky should be ablaze. No shadows, no night, just light, piled upon light. But that is not what we see. The sky is not filled with fire. It is deep and dark, scattered with points of brilliance, surrounded by endless black. If there are infinite stars, then why does the night not burn like day? In an infinite universe, every patch of sky should be occupied, stars near and far layered through space. Even the most distant stars would shine. Their light would simply arrive fainter, slower, but it would arrive. And yet the darkness persists, cool, vast, empty. This is the heart of Olbers Paradox, a contradiction between logic and sight, between what should be and what is. For centuries, thinkers wrestled with it. Some said dust blocked the distant light, but over time that explanation dimmed. Dust would heat up, absorb the energy, and glow itself. It would not stay dark forever. Others believed the universe was not infinite after all, that perhaps it had an edge. A place where stars stopped, but that raised new questions. What lay beyond the edge? Why would it end? The solution came slowly, like dawn breaking behind mountains. It began with the idea that the universe is not eternal, that it has a beginning, a birth, a moment when light first started moving. If the universe has only existed for a finite amount of time, then there has only been so much time for light to travel. Even if stars fill the void, their light has not yet reached us. Some of it is still on the way, and then came expansion. The space between galaxies is not still. It stretches, pulling stars away. Their light too stretches. Wavelengths grow longer, shifting into infrared, into radio, into silence. Light becomes invisible. The night is dark because the universe is young and growing. Because we live in a moment suspended between birth and infinity. A time when stars have not yet filled the sky with all their voices. What we see is not an absence of stars. It is an absence of time. An absence of arrival. Darkness not as a void, but as a waiting. Olbers Paradox reminds us that even emptiness can be full of meaning. That what we do not see can be more revealing than what we do. The dark is not the opposite of light. It is its frame. The silence between stars, the breath the universe takes between heartbeats. So the next time you look up and see the blackness stretched above you, remember that it is not blank. It is a story still unfolding. A sky still becoming. Sleep beneath that sky now. Let it wrap around you. Let the unanswered question of its darkness settle softly in your thoughts. Not as a riddle to solve, but as a lullaby written in light that has not yet arrived. You blink. The world feels real. The air moves. The light shifts. Your body hums with quiet certainty. But then, a thought drifts in. What if none of this is real? What if the world you know is only a simulation? This is the simulation paradox. The unsettling idea that everything around you, matter, memory, motion, might be artificial, not imagined by you, but rendered by something else, something higher, something hidden. It begins with a simple question. If technology keeps advancing, then eventually a civilization might be able to simulate entire worlds, not just landscapes, but people, minds, histories, whole universes, coded from silence. And if they can, why wouldn't they? Curiosity alone could spark it, to simulate their past, to explore branching futures, to ask what might have happened if just one thing had gone differently. One war avoided, one star never born. Now imagine this. For every real universe, there could be millions of simulations, stacked like reflections in a hall of mirrors, some detailed, some simple, some indistinguishable from truth. So where does that leave you? If there are far more simulated realities than real ones, then the odds say you're probably inside one. A life lived inside code. A mind flickering through lines of logic, unaware of its own origin. And yet you feel real. Your thoughts feel real. Your memories feel warm, alive. Can a simulation feel like this? Can it dream? Can it ache? Can it wonder about itself, like you are now? That's the paradox. If the simulation is perfect, you'd never know. And if it's imperfect, you still wouldn't be sure. Every glitch could be dismissed, every strange pattern explained away. You are trapped inside the question. Some say it's impossible, that no computer could hold a mind, that consciousness can't be simulated, that there is something sacred, something irreducible in the human experience. But others argue that consciousness is just information. Patterns, complexity. If so, then it can be recreated, simulated, rerun 1,000 times with different outcomes. So which is it? Is the universe made of atoms or algorithms? Do stars burn with fusion or with function calls? Is death the end of a process or just the moment the program stops running? And if we are in a simulation, does it matter? Does love mean less if it's rendered? Does beauty lose its shine if it's generated? Do your thoughts carry less weight if they're made of numbers, not neurons. The simulation paradox asks not whether the world is real, but whether reality needs to be real to matter. Whether truth is about origin or experience. You touch the wall. It feels solid. You breathe in. The air fills your lungs. Maybe that's enough. Maybe being in the question is the only real thing there is. So you close your eyes. The stars above you might be pixels. The bed beneath you might be code. But the feeling of sleep, drifting in slowly, is your own. And as you fade, soft and wondering, the question hums in the background, not to be answered, only to be heard. Are you real, or are you something greater, something imagined, imagining itself? A sealed box sits in the dark, cut off from the world. Inside there is nothing but gas, molecules dancing wildly, bouncing off the walls, colliding in chaos. Everything is random. No pattern, just pure thermal noise. Now imagine splitting the box into two halves, left and right. The gas remains evenly spread, hot molecules, cold molecules, all mixed together. Entropy reigns, the great equalizer. Disorder is the law of the land. But then, something strange appears. A tiny gate forms between the two sides, and at that gate stands a demon. Not a creature of myth or shadow, but a thought experiment. Invisible, silent, watching. The demon does not touch the gas. It does not add energy or remove heat. It simply opens and closes the gate with perfect precision. When a fast-moving molecule approaches from the left, it opens the gate and lets it pass to the right. When a slow-moving molecule approaches from the right, it lets it drift left, and molecule by molecule, moment by moment, the demon sorts the chaos until one side becomes hot, the other cold. Order from disorder. A system once balanced, now divided, and here lies the paradox. According to the second law of thermodynamics, entropy must always increase, heat spreads, energy disperses, order decays, yet this demon defies that rule. Without expending energy, it lowers entropy, it creates a temperature difference. It builds a machine that should be impossible. Maxwell's demon is not a villain. It is a whisper in the laws of physics. A gentle reminder that even our strongest certainties have cracks, that even thermodynamics, the backbone of the physical world, can be shaken by a single watching eye. For over a century, scientists struggled to answer it. How could this happen? How could mere observation reverse the arrow of time? They tried to trap the demon with logic, to bind it in equations, to disprove its existence. Some argued the demon must use energy to observe, to decide, to act. That hidden cost would restore the balance. That information is not free. That memory and measurement burn fuel, even if we cannot see the fire. Others look deeper into entropy itself. Perhaps information is physical. Perhaps knowledge has weight, and decision has heat. The demon, they said, is not magical. It is bound by the same rules it seems to break. Yet the paradox remains, because the demon asks a question too big to ignore. What is the boundary between thought and action, between knowing something and changing it? If observation has power, if consciousness alters outcome, then where do we draw the line? At what point does a mind become a machine? At what scale does awareness begin to tip the balance of the world? Some say the demon is just a metaphor, a story told in gas and gates to explore the cost of knowing. Others see it as a doorway, a clue that entropy is not as absolute as it seems. That maybe, just maybe, there are ways to cheat the decay, and still others hear a deeper whisper. That the universe is not a closed system, but a game of attention. That what we notice shapes what exists, that a silent observer, unseen and unknown, could turn disorder into design. Maxwell's demon is not an answer. It is a question, folded into a box, hidden in heat, waiting at the gate. It reminds us that the rules we follow may not be the rules that rule us, that there are systems inside systems, patterns we do not yet see, and watchers we do not yet understand. Because in the quiet spaces, in the gaps between cause and effect, between randomness and purpose, something strange might still be listening. And what if the demon is not just in the box? What if it is in us, the part that watches, that waits, that opens gates without knowing why? What if every decision, every thought is its own kind of sorting? A subtle act of entropy defiance. And if that is true, then perhaps the greatest paradox is not the demon. Perhaps it is that we exist at all. You are lost in a desert. The sun burns overhead, your lips are cracked, your throat dry. Around you, nothing moves. Just sand, heat, silence. You would give anything for a sip of water. One drop, one mouthful. In this moment it is more precious than gold. And yet, far away, in a velvet box under soft museum lights, a diamond waits. Flawless, cold, brilliant. People have killed for it. Fortunes have been traded for its shimmer. It sits untouched, admired, locked behind glass, surrounded by guards. Here lies the paradox. Water is life. It flows through every living thing. It nourishes, cleanses, sustains. Without it, everything dies. Diamonds, by contrast, do nothing. They are ornamental, inert, unnecessary. And yet, one is nearly free. The other, priceless. This is the paradox of value, also known as the diamond-water paradox. It asks a simple question with no simple answer. Why do we pay so much for what we do not need, and so little for what we cannot live without? The ancient philosophers noticed it. Socrates, Plato, and later, Adam Smith, they puzzled over it, trying to understand how something so essential could be so cheap, while something so useless could command the wealth of empires. The answer seemed to lie in the difference between utility and exchange. Water has high utility. It serves a function, fulfills a need, but it is abundant. It surrounds us. It falls from the sky, runs through pipes, spills from fountains. Its very presence lowers its price. Diamonds, on the other hand, are rare, not in the universe but in our reach. Their scarcity inflates their worth. Their function is almost non-existent, but their availability is limited. They are symbols, more than substances, and symbols are powerful. Still, the paradox lingers, because value is not fixed, it bends under context. In the desert, a glass of water is salvation. In a jewelry store, it is nothing. In a flood, water becomes a threat. In a drought, a prayer. So what is value really? Is it need? Is it want? Is it the story we wrap around a thing? The meaning we assign? The rarity we believe in? The desire we project? Economists eventually reframed the question. They spoke of marginal utility, the value of the next unit. The first glass of water when you are dying of thirst is worth more than the last, but the 10th, the 20th, less so. Meanwhile, one diamond remains singular, untouched by repetition. But even this fails to quiet the unease, because the paradox is not just economic, it is existential. It touches on how we live, what we chase, what we choose to honor. We trade time for money, money for objects, objects for identity. We build monuments to luxury while ignoring the quiet miracles that keep us alive. We name our cities after conquerors, not farmers. We crown jewels, but forget the wells. And maybe that's what the paradox is really whispering. That we don't just misunderstand value, we construct it. That worth is not discovered, but assigned. And that sometimes we get it backwards. We confuse permanence with importance, rarity with meaning, shine with substance. We lift up the cold, the hard, the sparkling, and overlook the flowing, the soft, the essential. What if the things we treat as priceless are only reflections of our insecurity? What if we treasure diamonds, not because they're valuable, but because they are useless, because they are pure in their purposelessness? Meanwhile, water asks nothing. It simply gives quietly, constantly. It does not glean. It does not cut. It does not resist. It only moves, and in doing so, it sustains. So here we are, creatures of contradiction. We long for meaning, but chase illusion. We are dying of thirst, surrounded by treasure, still reaching for what will never quench us. The paradox of value is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. It is the dream we bought into. It is the quiet cost of forgetting what matters. And perhaps that is the final truth it offers, that the most valuable things are the ones we do not count, the ones that disappear when we stop noticing, the ones that hold us together, drop by drop, breath by breath, while we chase diamonds. A particle drifts through empty space. It has no position, no path. It is not here or there. It is everywhere at once, a cloud of probability, a whisper of where it might be. It is not watched, and so it is free. But then something happens. A detector clicks. A measurement is made. A question is asked. And the particle answers, not with words, but with location. It chooses a place, a point, a certainty. The cloud collapses. The freedom ends. This is the observer effect. A strange truth at the heart of quantum mechanics. The idea that simply watching changes what is real. That the act of observing reshapes the observed. In everyday life, we believe we can look without touching. That the world exists apart from us. That it unfolds on its own, indifferent to our gaze. But at the smallest scale, the universe does not agree. The moment we observe, we interfere, we disturb. We collapse possibilities into outcomes. We trade potential for presence. And in doing so, we change what was once unknowable into something fixed. Electrons behave like waves, spread out, uncertain, until we measure them. Then they become particles, definite, specific. The act of looking transforms them, as if attention itself is a force, as if consciousness is not outside the system, but inside it. It is easy to mistake this for magic. It is not. It is mathematics.
Experiment.
Repeated again and again, each time confirming what feels impossible. That to know something is to change it. But it does feel like magic, because it suggests something wild. That the universe is not a machine ticking away in darkness. That it notices us. That we are part of the equation. Even in the macro world, the effect echoes. People behave differently when watched. A room changes when you enter. A moment shifts when you become aware of it. The world bends toward perception. Some say this is psychology. Others say it is physics. Maybe it is both. Maybe there is no boundary. Maybe the mind and the matter are entangled more deeply than we want to admit. It brings us back to an ancient question. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? The observer effect answers softly. It depends, because sound is not just vibration. It is sensation, awareness, interpretation. Without an observer, the wave is only potential. With one, it becomes experience. So what else changes when we watch? Do events crystallize from chaos? Do memories fix themselves in place? Does the past settle into shape only once someone looks back? And what about the self? If we observe ourselves, our thoughts, our actions, our feelings, do we shift in response? Do we become different just by being seen? The observer effect asks us to question the ground we stand on, to wonder if the objective world is ever truly separate, or if it is more like a mirror, shimmering with our reflection. Maybe there is no such thing as pure objectivity. Maybe every observation carries the fingerprint of the observer, a smudge on the lens that cannot be wiped away. In this view, reality is not a thing, it is a relationship. A dance between what is there and what is noticed, between being and knowing, between presence and perception. And if that is true, then nothing exists alone. Every particle, every planet, every thought is shaped by something else watching, listening, noticing. The observer effect is not a glitch in the system. It is the system. It is the breath in the measurement, the flicker in the gaze, the quiet truth that nothing is untouched. So the next time you look at something, truly look. Remember this, the act of seeing is never neutral. It is always creation, always connection, and the universe just might be looking back. A man sits alone in a quiet room. In front of him, a device hums softly, It is small, simple, and connected to something deeper than electricity. A quantum trigger, it will measure the spin of a single particle, up or down, left or right, life or death. Each time the device is activated, it chooses one outcome leads to silence, the other to survival. The man presses the button, the machine clicks, and from his perspective, he always lives. This is the thought experiment known as quantum suicide, a dark mirror to Schrödinger's cat. But this time, the cat is conscious, the observer is inside the box, and the outcome is personal. The idea is tied to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, a theory that says every possible event creates a new branch of reality. When the particle is measured, the universe splits. In some timelines, the man dies. In others, he does not. From the outside, countless versions of him vanish. But from the inside, there is only one thread, one continuous experience, one self that always finds a way to continue. No matter how unlikely, no matter how impossible, this leads to the strange and disturbing idea of quantum immortality. That from your own point of view, you never die, you only ever wake up in the branches where you survive. Again and again, forever. It is not a fairy tale, not a dream of eternal youth. You do not heal, you do not grow stronger. You simply persist through accidents, through disease, through pain. The universe reshapes itself around your unbroken awareness. Others disappear. Friends, family, strangers, they die in their own timelines, their own branches. But your story keeps going. A narrow thread of survival, pulled tighter and tighter through a universe unraveling. And the thread does not guarantee joy. It does not promise meaning. It only promises more moments, more versions, more you, even if that means waking up in a hospital bed, or a body that no longer moves, or a mind that flickers in and out of silence. Some call it immortality, others call it a trap. Because if there is always a version of you that continues, then death is something you never get to meet. Only the other versions do. And you keep watching. It raises questions we are not ready to answer. What is the self? What does it mean to survive? Are you the sum of your memories, your body, your ability to feel, or simply the fact that you are aware? If you lose everything but that awareness, are you still you? And if you can never truly stop being aware, is that life or something else? The thought experiment is not about physics alone. It is about consciousness, about what it means to experience reality from the inside, about how fragile and stubborn a single perspective can be. Quantum mechanics does not say this must be true, but it allows the possibility, and that possibility is enough to unsettle the ground beneath your feet, to make you wonder if the end you fear is an illusion you will never touch. And if that is the case, then the true question is not whether you will die. It is how long you will endure, how far the thread of your survival will stretch, and what it might look like at the edges. Because even if you cannot stop, even if you always wake up, you may not like where you find yourself. A future built on improbable chances, on narrow escapes, on the absence of everyone else. Quantum suicide and immortality is not a promise. It is a mirror, a way to look at your life and ask, what would it mean if this path never ends? And if the answer frightens you, then maybe the real gift is that in most worlds it does. Maybe the real mercy is that one day, in one version, the thread is allowed to break, and you are finally still. In a quiet room filled with books and dust, a man writes symbols no one else understands. The year is 1931. The air hums with the promise of certainty. Mathematicians believe they are close, that soon all truths will be known, all logic, complete, all proofs, perfect. But the man sees something they do not. He sees a crack, a fault line running beneath the entire structure of reason. And with quiet hands, he writes down a truth that cannot be proven, a sentence that breaks the machine from the inside. His name is Kurt Gödel. And what he discovers changes everything. Gödel's incompleteness theorems are not loud. They do not shout. They whisper. They say, no system of logic can ever explain everything. There will always be truths that cannot be proven, always questions that cannot be answered from within. He shows that any system complex enough to describe arithmetic will contain statements that are true, but cannot be proven true using that system. The system will never be whole, never self-sufficient, always incomplete. It is like a map that cannot contain itself, a book that cannot describe its own pages, a mirror that cannot reflect its own back. At first, this seems impossible. We trust logic, we build our world on it. Numbers, proofs, computers, theories, all resting on the assumption that reason is enough, that every truth can be reached if we only think hard enough. But Gödel shows that there are truths beyond proof, that even mathematics has blind spots, that certainty has limits, not because we are flawed, but because the structure itself is. The first theorem says incompleteness is inevitable. The second says something worse, that a system cannot prove its own consistency. You cannot use the rules to prove the rules are reliable. You cannot stand on your own shoulders. These are not mistakes, they are boundaries. Edges written into the nature of logic itself. Gödel did not break mathematics. He revealed what was already there, waiting in the silence between symbols, and the consequences ripple outward, into philosophy, into physics, into computer science, into every field that depends on the dream of completeness. The idea that we can know all, prove all, explain all. Some say the theorems are abstract, that they live only in the realm of formal logic, but others see something more, a deeper truth about the universe, that reality itself may not be fully knowable, that the foundations of existence may hold mysteries that no system can reach. It changes how we see knowledge, not as a tower, but as an island, surrounded by waters we cannot cross. Each theorem a lighthouse, warning us of the limits ahead. Even language feels the echo. Self-reference becomes dangerous. Circular definitions collapse. Paradoxes multiply. Truth begins to shimmer, not as a clear path, but as a fog that thickens the closer we get. Gödel lived quietly. He feared poison, illness, betrayal. He starved himself in the end, but his work continues to haunt us, a kind of ghost in the machine of certainty, reminding us that not everything true can be proved, not everything real can be reached. And maybe that is not a failure. Maybe it is the beauty of it, that the universe keeps something for itself, that there will always be truths just out of reach, questions with no final answer, light that never touches the ground. The incompleteness theorems are not errors in the code. They are the code. They are the silent signature, written into the heart of all logic. And when we lie awake wondering if the world makes sense, they answer gently, not completely, and never completely. In a peaceful land, a society thrives, people speak freely, they live without fear. Ideas flow like wind between open windows. Tolerance is their foundation. The belief that all voices deserve space, that disagreement is not danger, that every opinion has the right to be heard. But then a new voice enters. It is loud, sharp. It does not ask for space. It demands it. It does not seek dialogue. It seeks dominance. It preaches intolerance. It mocks openness. And yet by the very rules of tolerance, it is allowed to speak. The people hesitate. Should they silence this voice? Doing so would betray their values. But allowing it to grow feels dangerous. Its words are seeds, and some begin to take root. This is the paradox of tolerance. Introduced by philosopher Karl Popper, it asks a painful question. If a tolerant society tolerates intolerance, will it survive? Because intolerance does not stay idle. It spreads. It recruits. It builds. And tolerance, in its silence, becomes its shield. A society that defends all speech, even the speech that seeks to end freedom, may be digging its own grave. The paradox reveals a contradiction, that unlimited tolerance can lead to the end of tolerance, that protecting every voice may allow the loudest to silence the rest. So what should be done? Popper's answer is unsettling. He says we must be intolerant of intolerance, that to preserve openness, we must sometimes close the door, that not every idea deserves a platform, but that line is hard to draw. Who decides what is dangerous, what is simply different, what is destructive? The risk is not just in action, but in judgment, in the power to define the unacceptable. And yet the danger of inaction may be greater. History has shown us what happens when hate is allowed to grow in the name of free expression. When the seeds of extremism bloom in silence, when tolerance is used as a weapon against itself, the paradox is not a call to censorship. It is a warning that freedom requires defense, that a balance must be kept, that open hands must still learn when to close. It forces us to ask hard questions. Can a society truly be free if it allows its enemies to flourish? Can a community stay whole if it welcomes those who want to break it apart? Some say sunlight is the best disinfectant, that bad ideas should be exposed, not hidden, that truth will win if given the stage. But others argue that attention is fuel, that visibility gives power, that even poison can spread when bottled in words. The paradox does not offer comfort. It does not say what is right. It only shows the tension, the thin edge between principle and survival, between openness and collapse. Tolerance feels gentle, it feels kind, but it is not passive. It must be active, vigilant, willing to defend the space it creates. Because there are wolves that wear the language of sheep. There are storms that enter as breezes, and sometimes the most dangerous words are the ones wrapped in the language of freedom. So the paradox lives on, a quiet fire beneath the surface of every free society, whispering that not all threats arrive with weapons, some arrive with microphones, and in the stillness we are left with a choice. To protect tolerance even when it means drawing lines. To speak even when silence feels polite. To act even when the danger wears a familiar face. The paradox of tolerance does not destroy the dream of a free world. It refines it. It reminds us that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of boundaries. Boundaries drawn, not in fear, but in love. Love for the fragile thing we call freedom. A love that knows when to say yes, and when it must, with sorrow and resolve, say no. A raven sits on a fence, black as midnight. It watches the world with still eyes, unmoving, unreadable. Somewhere, a philosopher asks a question. A simple one: all ravens are black, but how do we know? The answer seems easy. We look at ravens, one after another, and if they are all black, we begin to believe the rule. Each black raven confirms the statement. Each one adds weight to the truth, but then the paradox arrives, quiet as snowfall. What if we look at something else entirely? A white shoe, a green leaf, a red apple, not a raven, not black, just something else. And yet, if it is not a raven, and it is not black, then it still supports the claim. All ravens are black. This object is not a raven, and it is not black. Therefore, it does not contradict the rule. So somehow, a white shoe becomes evidence for the blackness of ravens. An orange becomes proof. A glacier, a flame. Each non-black non-raven adds support to a rule about birds we have never seen. This is the Raven Paradox, also called Hempel's Paradox. It reveals a strange tension in the logic of confirmation, that to confirm a universal claim, even unrelated things can count as evidence. The logic is tight, but the conclusion feels wrong. How can something so unrelated be meaningful? How does looking at a tomato tell us anything about ravens? And yet the paradox insists, because every rule has a shape, and anything that does not break the shape in some quiet way strengthens it. Still, our minds resist. We feel the difference between direct evidence and abstract consistency. We trust the raven more than the apple, the shadow more than the shine. But the paradox shows how fragile our intuition can be, how even the deepest truths might rest on reasoning we barely understand, that what we believe as certainty may rest on chains of logic too strange to follow. It forces us to ask what evidence really means. Is it observation? Is it absence? Is it silence where noise could be? Because if everything that does not contradict us supports us, then what does it mean to truly test a belief? The Raven Paradox stretches beyond birds and colors. It reaches into science, into reasoning, into the way we build theories from fragments in dust, how we see patterns in the fog. And it warns us that sometimes our methods carry ghosts, that our logic may lead us somewhere true, but through paths that feel false. Some try to solve it with probability. With Bayesian thinking, they weigh evidence, not just count it. A black raven carries more weight than a white sock. But the paradox remains, whispering at the edges, because deep down, it is not just about evidence, it is about how we understand truth, whether it lives in the obvious or hides in the absence of contradiction. Perhaps the paradox is not meant to be resolved. Perhaps it is a reminder that truth is not always built from what we see. Sometimes it is built from what the world refuses to show. So we return to the raven, still on the fence, still watching, and around it, a world filled with things that are not black and not ravens, and somehow all of it matters. Every shadow, every petal, every quiet thing that never needed wings. A universe whispering, again and again, not in proof, but in possibility. The sun has risen every morning of your life. Light spills through windows, shadows stretch across the floor. The pattern is familiar, comforting, expected, and so, without thinking, you believe it will rise again tomorrow. Not because you know, but because it always has. This is induction, the quiet logic we live by. When we see something happen over and over, we begin to trust the pattern, a cause, an effect, a rhythm we can rely on. Milk spoils, fire burns, rain falls from clouds. We turn repetition into belief, but then comes the problem. Raised by a philosopher named David Hume, he asked the question no one wanted to hear. Why should the future resemble the past? Why do we assume the pattern will hold? Just because something has always happened does not mean it must continue. There is no proof the sun will rise tomorrow, only the memory that it rose today, and yesterday, and 1,000 yesterdays before that. Hume showed that induction rests on a kind of circular logic. We believe the future will follow the past, because it always has, but that itself is a belief built from induction. A loop with no true beginning. The problem of induction is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a mirror. It reflects our need for certainty in a world that offers none. We crave rules, but the rules themselves are fragile. Science leans on induction, observation, repetition, theories tested again and again. But even the most trusted laws are only as strong as their past success. One black swan breaks the rule, one strange event, and the pattern is gone. So what do we do with this? If we cannot trust the future to echo the past, how do we live? How do we act? How do we plan? The answer, perhaps, is that we live with a kind of faith, not in a higher power, but in the rhythm of nature, a faith that what was will continue to be, not because it must, but because it usually does. This kind of belief is not weakness, it is the fabric of experience. We cross bridges, we drink water, we breathe, trusting that air will fill our lungs. At every moment we assume stability, and yet the paradox lingers. There is no logical reason the world must stay the same. Gravity could shift, light could dim, the rules could change, but they haven't. So we carry on, gently blind to the possibility of chaos. Some thinkers try to tame the paradox with probability. They say patterns make predictions likely, not certain, that we live by likelihood, not law, but even this dances on the same edge. The future is still a mystery. The problem of induction does not destroy reason, it softens it. It reminds us that knowledge is not absolute, that the foundation beneath our thoughts is not bedrock, but soft earth shifting underfoot. And perhaps that is its gift, to make us humble, to make us curious, to remind us that every prediction is a quiet leap into the unknown. So when the sun rises tomorrow, do not take it for granted. See it for what it is, not a guarantee, but a gentle miracle. A moment that chose to follow the past, and if one day it does not rise, It will not be the end of logic, only the end of a pattern we mistook for truth. The problem of induction whispers beneath every answer. It lives in every experiment, every routine, every step forward. Not to paralyze us, but to awaken us, to remind us that the world does not owe us consistency, and that certainty is always borrowed, never owned. A river flows under a stone bridge. The water is slow, reflective, deep. On one side stands Socrates. On the other, Plato. Between them, a promise waits, a condition wrapped in logic, caught in contradiction. Plato says to Socrates, "If you tell the truth, I will let you cross. If you lie, I will throw you into the water." Simple rules, a test of honesty. Socrates pauses, then he speaks, "You will throw me into the water." The sentence lands like a stone, not heavy, but impossible. Plato now stands before a choice he cannot resolve. If Socrates is telling the truth, then Plato must throw him in. But if he throws him in for telling the truth, he breaks the rule, he punishes honesty. But if Socrates is lying, and Plato throws him in, then he acted correctly. Yet that means the statement was true, which means Socrates wasn't lying, which means he should not have been thrown. The loop spins endlessly, a paradox at the edge of the bridge. Socrates has spoken a sentence that Plato cannot respond to without contradiction. This is Buridan's bridge, a thought experiment wrapped in language. It asks what happens when rules meet statements that fold back on themselves. Self-reference, tied into knots, it is cousin to the liar paradox. This sentence is false, a phrase that undoes itself as soon as it is believed. But here the consequences are not just logical, they are physical. Action becomes entangled with truth. Plato cannot act without breaking the condition. He is frozen by the weight of a sentence, held still by a bridge that has become a riddle. We think of language as a guide, a tool to express, to clarify, to decide. But sometimes, language becomes a trap, a loop with no exit, a bridge that leads nowhere. Buridan's bridge forces us to consider the limits of logic. What happens when truth and consequence can no longer align? When a statement changes its own meaning by how we respond to it, it shows us that even perfect rules can collapse under certain phrases, that systems built on clarity can be unraveled by a single clever sentence. Some try to untangle the paradox. They say the statement is neither true nor false, others call it meaningless, but none of these answers feel whole, because the moment still stands, suspended over the river, and in that stillness, we see a deeper reflection. How often do our choices hinge on impossible conditions? How often are we caught between outcomes that undo each other? Buridan's bridge is not just about logic, it is about tension, about moments where every path collapses the one beside it, where to move is to contradict, and to stay is to fail. Perhaps that is why the river beneath the bridge moves so slowly, as if it understands, as if it too waits for a resolution that never comes. In the end, the paradox does not resolve, it only returns. Like the water, like the mind circling its own questions, like a thought that never quite lands. Buridan's bridge remains, a quiet crossing where meaning splits in two, a test not of truth, but of the strange places truth can lead us. And there, standing in silence, is Socrates, not moving, not smiling, just waiting. A bridge stretches over a quiet river, motionless under a cloudless sky. On one side stands Socrates, on the other, Plato. Between them lies a paradox, woven into the very boards beneath their feet. Plato stops Socrates before he crosses. He makes a declaration, calm and strange. If what you say is true, I shall let you pass. If what you say is false, I shall throw you into the water. Socrates considers this. The sun warm on his shoulders, the river whispers below. He speaks slowly, choosing his words like pebbles placed on a scale. You will throw me into the water. And just like that, the world slips sideways, because now Plato is caught. If the statement is true, then he must throw Socrates in. But by doing so, the statement becomes false. If the statement is false, then he must let Socrates cross. But that would make the statement true, a contradiction, a loop, a trap with no exit. This is Burdin's bridge, a paradox that turns truth into quicksand. Every step forward becomes another step in place. The more you try to resolve it, the more it coils inward. It asks a simple question with impossible consequences. What happens when a conditional promise is tested by self-reference? What happens when action depends on the truth of something that the action itself destroys? It is a bridge not of wood or stone, but logic. And once you set foot on it, you may never reach the other side. The philosopher Jean Burdin posed this puzzle, not to torment minds, but to reveal the tension between language and reality, between what is said and what must follow. Socrates does not lie. He does not tell the truth. He does both. He does neither. Plato, for all his power, is frozen. To act is to contradict. To do nothing is to admit defeat. The paradox does not belong to Socrates anymore. It belongs to Plato. The bridge becomes a mirror, not of faces but of rules. It shows the fault lines in our thinking, the places where logic begins to fold in on itself. Because if even a single sentence can create such chaos, how many more lie hidden in the things we believe? Burdin's bridge is not famous. It does not echo through lecture halls the way the lyre or the grandfather does. But it waits, quietly, a forgotten gem buried in the sands of medieval thought. And like many paradoxes, it does not demand an answer. It does not seek resolution. It simply exists, a riddle wrapped in conditional logic, bound to collapse under the weight of its own design. You can try to sidestep it. You can claim the rules were unclear, that the promise never needed to be kept. But the bridge does not care. It has no guards. Only questions. Can truth survive when it predicts its own destruction? Can a promise be broken by the very act of fulfilling it? And if language can trap itself in such perfect knots, what does that say about the minds that use it? The river below flows on, unconcerned. Time slides past like a shadow, and somewhere Socrates still stands, waiting for Plato to decide. Perhaps he never will. Perhaps the moment stretches forever. A single breath held across centuries, or perhaps the bridge is not there at all. Just an idea, suspended in thought. Either way, you are already crossing it. A woman lies asleep in a quiet room. The walls are blank, the air still. Her name is Beauty. Outside, the world continues without her. Inside, time is held in a delicate pause. On Sunday, she is told what will happen. A fair coin will be flipped. If it lands heads, she will be awakened once on Monday. If it lands tails, she will be awakened twice, once on Monday, once on Tuesday. Each time she wakes, the room will look the same. She will remember nothing of the previous day. She will not know which day it is. She will not know how the coin landed. Then she is given a sleeping potion. Darkness folds in around her. The experiment begins. She wakes up. The light is soft. The room is silent. She does not know whether it is Monday or Tuesday. She does not know if the coin was heads or tails. She knows only that she is awake, and that this moment is real. And then comes the question, whispered into her thoughts like a riddle. What is the probability that the coin landed heads? Her instincts tell her it is simple. A fair coin, 50-50, heads or tails. But the silence of the room offers no reassurance. No clock, no calendar, just her and the question. Some say the answer is 1/2. The coin was fair. Nothing has changed that. She is awake, yes, but that tells her nothing new. Others say the answer is 1/3, because if the coin landed heads, there is only one awakening. If it landed tails, there are two, and she could be in either one. One awakening versus two. 1 in 3. The math begins to bend. This is the Sleeping Beauty problem, a paradox that turns probability into a question of perspective. Not what is, but when. It forces us to ask, when you gain information, but forget it later, does your knowledge reset, or does it compound across your possible selves? Beauty lies at the center of this web, suspended between outcomes. Her memories erased, her context stripped away, her very identity blurred by the structure of the game. She does not choose to play. She only wakes and wonders. And yet the paradox is not hers alone. It belongs to all who try to measure uncertainty from the inside, to all who forget, who repeat, who search for meaning in cycles. It is not just about probability, it is about being, about what it means to know, when your knowledge is limited by design. The Sleeping Beauty problem whispers a deeper question: can you ever trust your sense of likelihood if you do not know where you stand in time? Beauty may wake 1,000 times, each one may feel like the first, each one may carry the same question, and still, the answer might slip through her fingers like sand. Maybe the truth is not in the number, but in the awareness, the recognition that belief and context are entwined, like a thread wrapped around a dream. And maybe as she wakes again to the same quiet room, beauty is not confused at all. Maybe she simply waits, listening, letting the question bloom inside her, soft as the breath between moments. Because in that stillness, the coin is always spinning. The numbers are drawn once a week, quietly, without ceremony. 1 billion tickets fluttering through chance, waiting to be named. Somewhere in that sea of ink and hope, a single winner will rise. The rest will vanish into silence. Now imagine holding one of those tickets. You look at it. You examine the ink. You know the odds. You whisper to yourself, this ticket will not win. You are almost certainly right. The probability is so small, so close to nothing, that your belief feels safe, reasonable, logical. Now imagine doing the same for every other ticket. One by one, you say, this one won't win. That one won't win either. You continue through the pile, nodding with confidence at each. And then something strange begins to happen. Each individual belief is justified, but taken together, they create something impossible. Because you now believe that no ticket will win. Not just your own, all of them. And that cannot be true. Someone must win, that is the rule of the game. This is the lottery paradox. A fracture between reason and certainty. A gentle collision between what seems true and what must be false. It begins with something innocent, believing what is likely, but it ends in a contradiction that logic cannot contain. The paradox lives in the space between the parts and the whole. Each belief makes sense on its own, but together they shatter. You cannot say with confidence that each ticket will lose, while also knowing one must win. And yet that is exactly what we do. It is not just a puzzle, it is a reflection. A mirror held up to the ways we think, the ways we trust probability over possibility. In daily life, we carry this paradox quietly. We assume planes will land safely, people will not lie, bridges will hold. Individually, our beliefs feel rational, but gather them, and you may find they form a structure built on contradictions, a house of cards drifting in the breeze of likelihood. The lottery paradox asks us to reconsider the comfort of reason, to question the subtle moments when logic splits from reality. It does not scold. It does not demand. It simply waits, like a whisper inside your thoughts, asking whether belief can ever be both justified and wrong. And it offers no answer, only the soft flicker of numbers, endlessly drawn, endlessly watched. Perhaps the paradox is not a failure of logic, but a lesson in humility. A reminder that knowing something with near certainty is not the same as knowing it absolutely. That truth, in its quiet way, resists being divided and counted. It prefers to live in shadows, just beyond the reach of perfect thought. So you sit with your ticket, still warm in your hand, and feel the gentle weight of doubt, not heavy, just enough to remind you that the world is never as simple as it seems. And when the numbers are called, and the winner announced, you feel no anger, no surprise. Because part of you always knew that someone had to win. You just didn't know who. You sit in a quiet room, staring at a clock that does not tick, the hands do not move, the seconds do not pass, and yet everything that has ever happened is already there. This is the block universe, a model of reality where time is not a river, but a frozen map. Past, present, and future, all coexisting like cities on a page. Every moment that ever was and ever will be already exists. There is no flow, no becoming, just a structure, vast and silent, where every event is etched into the fabric of space-time. In this picture, your life is a complete sculpture. You are born, you breathe, you speak, you sleep. All of it is already carved in place. Immutable, inevitable. And then comes the paradox, the whisper in the stillness. If the future is already written, do you have any choice at all? When you decide to raise your hand, to turn your head, to speak a word you have not yet spoken, is that freedom? Or is it simply the unfolding of a script you cannot see? Free will, the feeling of choosing, begins to unravel in this view. Not because you are controlled, but because you are contained, locked into a four-dimensional shape where nothing can change. Some say this kills the soul of decision, that if your actions are part of the block, you are just a passenger, a phantom of inevitability. Others argue the opposite, that freedom does not require unpredictability. That choice is still real, even if it is already known, like a novel on a shelf, already written, yet still full of characters who choose, who struggle, who wonder. Their fates do not erase their agency, they give it shape. But can you really choose what has already been chosen? Can you be free if your freedom is already part of the pattern? The block universe holds no answers. It only reveals the shape of the question, and the question lingers, weightless, like dust in a sunbeam. Perhaps the paradox is not in time, but in how we see it. We live in the illusion of flow, of change, of now, but the universe may not share our perspective. Maybe time is not passing at all. Maybe we are the ones who move, like a needle across a record, hearing each note in order, never sensing the whole song beneath. In that case, what feels like choice may be memory. What feels like freedom may be position. What feels like becoming may just be being, stretched across dimensions. Still, we wake each day and feel the pull of decisions. We hesitate, we consider, we believe. That belief may be an echo, or it may be the only real thing we have. If the universe is a block, then every tear, every joy, every quiet act of courage was always there, waiting to be found. And in that stillness, maybe the paradox fades, not because it is solved, but because it becomes part of the shape, a shape that includes you, as you are, as you were, as you always will be, still choosing, still wondering, still free. A question drifts across the stillness, soft as a breath in the dark. Can an all-powerful being create a stone so heavy that even they cannot lift it? At first, it seems like a riddle meant to amuse children. A twist of language, a small circle drawn in chalk. But when you step inside, it does not let you go. If the being can create the stone, then they have made something they cannot overcome. A limit, a boundary to their power. If they cannot create it, then there is already something they are unable to do, a task that defeats them before it begins. Either way, something breaks. The idea of unlimited power begins to fold in on itself, not with noise, but with silence. This is the paradox of the stone, a thought experiment wrapped in the illusion of simplicity. It asks not just about gods, but about the edges of possibility. It whispers that some powers, when taken to their limits, cease to mean anything at all. What does it mean to be all-powerful, if power can be trapped by its own definition? Some try to escape the loop by redefining the terms. They say omnipotence only covers what is logically possible. A being need not perform the impossible to remain supreme. But then, who decides what counts as impossible? Who draws the line between nonsense and truth, between paradox and limit? Others suggest that true power includes the power to surrender, that a being might choose to create a stone they cannot lift, and in doing so prove something deeper than strength. That kind of power is not broken by contradiction. It absorbs it, it breathes through it, it becomes a mystery instead of a rule. Still, the question remains, not just in heaven or myth, but in the quiet parts of our minds, where certainty becomes fragile. We use the word infinite like it can be held in a cup, But perhaps some infinities are shaped like circles, closed, trapping thought inside. And perhaps the idea of ultimate control is always shadowed by the fear of collapse, that in trying to hold everything, we lose the shape of anything at all. The paradox is not cruel. It does not mock. It simply exists, like a stone resting at the bottom of a well, unmoved, unseen. Maybe the real weight is not the stone, but the question itself. Heavy not in size, but in implication. Can any being truly escape contradiction? Or does every idea pushed far enough eventually meet itself coming back? The stone waits in the silence. Whether it is liftable or not does not matter. What matters is the act of wondering. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point, that some questions are not meant to be answered, only asked. You step into a chamber made of glass and light. A quiet voice tells you to relax. In a moment, you will be somewhere else. The machine hums softly, as if exhaling. It begins by scanning every atom in your body, every molecule, every strand of memory, mapped with precision. Nothing is missed. You are copied perfectly. Then, your body is disassembled, painlessly, silently. No death, just disappearance. On the other side of the world, or perhaps on a distant moon, another chamber waits. It receives the data, reads the map, and builds you anew. Every thought, every scar, every dream, recreated exactly as it was. The doors open. You step out. You feel like you. You remember stepping in. You are alive. But the question has already begun to echo. Is that still you? The teletransportation paradox asks what it means to be a self. If your body can be taken apart and rebuilt, atom by atom, is the rebuilt version still the original? If the copy thinks like you, talks like you, loves like you, does it matter that it is not made of the same matter? And more troubling still, what if the original were not destroyed? What if the machine duplicated you, but left the first version intact? Now there are two, each claiming to be you, each with the same memories, the same desires, the same sense of self, but identity is not a thing you can split. Or is it? Some say that what matters is continuity of consciousness, that as long as the pattern survives, the self survives, that you are not a body, but an arrangement. Others argue the opposite, that without the same stream of awareness, uninterrupted and whole, the person on the other side is a stranger wearing your face. Philosophers have debated this for centuries, dressing it in the language of ships and souls, cells and machines, but the question remains untouched, like a shadow just out of reach. If you step into the teleporter, are you brave, or are you stepping into oblivion, leaving a perfect illusion behind? And if you knew the truth, would it stop you? The paradox turns quietly in the mind, like a coin on its edge, refusing to fall. Maybe the self is not a single thread, but a tapestry that can be rewoven. Maybe identity is a dance, not a destination, or maybe it is something deeper, something the machine cannot touch. A silence behind the eyes, unscannable, unmade. Still, the machine waits. Still, the doors open. Still, someone steps out smiling, and somewhere in the space between one chamber and the next, the question lingers, patient and eternal. Who exactly just arrived? Somewhere in the cold vastness of deep time, a brain flickers into existence. No body, no past, just a floating mind, assembled by chance from the quantum chaos of the universe. It opens its imaginary eyes, it feels thoughts it never earned, it remembers a life it never lived, a life that includes this very moment. This is a Boltzmann brain, a hypothetical being born not from evolution, not from biology, but from randomness alone. A brief structure in the sea of entropy, appearing by pure statistical fluke. Its memories are detailed. It believes it was born, raised, taught, shaped by years of experience. It feels real, and yet, it is a lie. It was created fully formed, a ghost of coincidence. The paradox begins here. If the universe lasts forever, and entropy increases without end, then rare events like organized brains can and will appear from nothing. The longer the universe exists, the more likely it becomes that such brains outnumber real ones, that they far outnumber us. And if most observers are random fluctuations with false memories, then why should we believe we are any different? You sit quietly, listening, breathing. You remember your childhood, your name, your favorite scent on rainy days, but none of that proves you were ever more than a flicker. It feels absurd, impossible, but the math does not flinch. Given infinite time, the unlikely becomes inevitable, and the inevitable becomes common. The Boltzmann brain paradox casts doubt on every observation, every certainty, every warm truth we hold. It suggests that illusion may be the rule, not the exception. It began with Ludwig Boltzmann, who tried to explain the universe through thermodynamics. Order, he said, is just a temporary fluctuation in a sea of disorder. But he never imagined the implications would fold in on themselves like this, that his logic would become a seed of cosmic doubt. Some scientists try to escape the paradox by rewriting the story. They say the universe must be young, or expanding, or finite. That certain models eliminate the likelihood of these phantom minds. But the question still floats, quiet and strange. What does it mean to be conscious, when consciousness itself can be forged by chaos? Maybe we are real, maybe our memories are earned, our pasts true, our future open. Or maybe we are Boltzmann brains, cradled in illusion, dreaming of meaning inside a meaningless void. There is no way to know, not truly. The paradox does not offer escape. It only offers reflection. A brain in the dark, thinking about itself, wondering if the stars it sees ever truly existed, and in that moment, even doubt becomes beautiful. Even uncertainty becomes part of the design, because whether we are the product of time, or chance, or something unnamed, we are still here, asking the question, and that, for now, is enough. You are born into a world of contrast, warm sun, cold shadow, laughter, followed by grief, a heartbeat, then silence. And beneath it all, a question hums, a riddle older than memory, older than time. If there is a force of infinite goodness, why does suffering exist? This is the problem of evil, not a question of theology alone, but a metaphysical wound. A paradox stitched into the fabric of existence itself, one that asks how light and darkness can be poured from the same hand. You look at a child crying out in pain, not a lesson, not a punishment, just pain. And you wonder, why would a perfect being allow this? The traditional answer is power. That which creates the stars must also govern the storm. An omnipotent force, all-knowing, all-loving. But if that is true, then why the broken bones, why the war, why the long nights of aching and unanswered prayers? Three things cannot live together in peace: that the divine is all-powerful, that it is purely good, and that evil exists. Choose two, and the third becomes impossible. If evil is real, and power is infinite, then love must be lacking. If love is infinite, and evil is real, then power must be incomplete. And if power and love are both true, then evil should not be here. But it is. You see it in the hospital ward, in the quiet sobbing of someone alone. You feel it in the cruelty that arises not from necessity, but from choice. A paradox that breathes through the world like wind through trees. Some say it is the price of freedom, that a world of puppets cannot love. And so, to give us the chance to choose the good, we must also be allowed to choose the terrible. But that only shifts the weight. Why grant freedom if the cost is genocide? Why build a world where evil is the doorway to love, when so many never make it through? Others say suffering refines us, that pain is the fire in which souls are forged, but the fire burns unevenly. Some emerge strong, others, ash. So then we ask, does the universe care for our becoming, or does it simply turn, cold and blind, while we attach meaning like stickers on a spinning globe? There are those who abandon the question entirely. They say there is no cosmic goodness, no architect, just chaos in motion. Pain exists because the dice rolled that way. No purpose, no paradox, just atoms and time. But even that explanation feels like a silence too loud. The ache remains. The question lingers, not in logic, but in the marrow of being. Why are we born into a world where tears fall before words are spoken? Where the innocent suffer and the guilty thrive? Where tragedy is not an anomaly, but a rhythm? Some turn inward. They say the divine is not a being, but a process. Not a father in the clouds, but a slow unfolding. A becoming, not a being. And evil, perhaps, is not a flaw, but a shadow cast by something still incomplete. Others imagine a cosmos beyond comprehension, a mind vast enough to hold pain and peace as necessary parts of a tapestry too large for us to see. From our place in the threads, the blood looks random, but from outside time it might form meaning. Still the paradox remains. It does not vanish with poetry or prayer. It lives in every cry of why. Why me? Why this? Why now? Maybe that is the point, not to solve it, but to feel it, to hold the tension like a candle in the dark, to sit with the impossible and let it burn quietly. The problem of evil does not ask for an answer. It asks us to look at the world, not with certainty, but with humility, to see both the horror and the beauty, to ask how they can coexist and what that says about everything. And maybe in the quiet between questions, something else begins to emerge, not a solution, but a stillness, a recognition that this paradox is not a mistake, but a mirror, showing us what we are, what we dream of, what we cannot yet understand. And in that not knowing, perhaps, something sacred lives. A man begins to write the story of his life, but he writes slowly, meticulously. One day of writing for each day of living. The ink dries as he breathes, the quill moves as his heart beats. One moment recorded for each moment lived. This is Tristram Shandy, a fictional writer with an impossible task, because every new day adds more to write. Every sentence written demands another in response. The autobiography grows not toward completion, but away from it. If it takes him 1 year to write about a single day, then he will fall behind forever. After a year, only the first day will be written. The rest remains untouched, and the present marches forward, indifferent to his careful hand. It seems hopeless, a task forever unfinished. A book that expands faster than it is written. A life that outruns its own telling. And yet, here is the paradox. What if Tristram lives forever? Infinite time, endless ink. A writer who never dies, could he eventually catch up? Could the slowness be matched by eternity? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Of course he can. Infinity is long enough for anything. But look again. Even with infinite time, he falls further and further behind. For each new day he lives, a new day must be written. But writing a day takes as long as living it. He never gets closer. The backlog never shrinks. Infinity is strange that way. It does not promise progress. It merely allows it, and sometimes it traps you in the very space it sets free. This is the Tristram Shandy paradox, a gentle contradiction, a quiet impossibility, where living and recording move in lockstep and yet drift apart. Mathematicians saw this paradox and wondered, what happens when processes grow at the same rate as the time they consume? What does it mean to fall behind in eternity? Some argued that it depends how you define completion. Maybe it is not about finishing the story, but continuing to write it. An infinite autobiography for an infinite life, always behind, yet always unfolding. But others saw a deeper tension, a question about memory, about narration, about how we make sense of ourselves. If the story of your life can never catch up to your living, do you ever truly know yourself? In the real world, we are all little Tristrams. We try to understand what we are, what we've done, where we are going. But the moment we begin, we fall behind. Experience rushes forward. The story grows faster than the telling. Our journals miss days. Our reflections leave gaps. Our memories blur and skip. And still we try. We write. We narrate. We search for coherence in the flood of time. Perhaps the paradox is not a flaw, but a mirror. It shows us that self-understanding is never finished, that to be alive is to be slightly out of sync with yourself. And maybe that's all right. Maybe the story does not need to catch up. Maybe it is enough that it keeps going, that the quill moves, that the ink flows, that the writer still tries. Tristram Shandy reminds us that to live is to overflow your own pages, that life is not a neat manuscript, but a scattering of notes, some written, some lost, and as we drift into sleep, we join him, writing our days and dreams, narrating moments that vanish by morning, always behind, always becoming. In that quiet delay, something tender emerges, a grace in not being finished, a beauty in the gap between life and its telling. And in that endless effort to catch up with ourselves, perhaps we are closest to being whole. You wake up on a quiet morning. The sky is still. The world hums with the illusion of permanence. Coffee steams. Birds move like drifting punctuation across the sentence of the sky. And yet beneath it all, a whisper lurks. A strange prediction wrapped in logic. The doomsday argument begins not with fire or prophecy, but with math. Cold, calm math. It asks a simple question: where are you in the story of humanity? Imagine all human beings who will ever exist. Count them. A final number, known only to time. Are you early in that line, in the middle, near the end? Statistically, you are likely to be somewhere in the middle. Not the very first, not the very last, just average. But if that's true, and you are born into the middle ranks of history, then most of humanity must already have been born. The number left to come is small. The end, closer than we imagined. This is the core of the argument. A quiet doom hiding inside a simple assumption that you are not special, that your birth is randomly placed within the total arc of human existence. And if you are number 100 billion out of 200 billion, the story is nearly done. The curtain almost drawn. The final chapter's approaching. At first it feels absurd. How can your position tell you anything about the end? But statistics has no need for drama. It only needs the law of averages, the quiet gravity of likelihood. It does not predict how the end comes, only that it comes sooner than we think. Not in 1,000 generations, but maybe just a few. Some reject it outright. They say the sample is flawed, that the logic collapses under deeper scrutiny, that human ingenuity will stretch our story for eons, and perhaps it will. But the paradox lingers, like a shadow that stretches no matter how bright the light becomes. It forces us to ask what it means to be alive now. In this sliver of time, is our era exceptional or typical? Are we the lucky first sparks or the final flickers? The doomsday argument doesn't want to frighten. It wants to reflect. It speaks not of apocalypse, but of perspective. A reminder that every moment is rare, that existing at all is strange, that being here now might mean something more. Others turn the paradox inside out. If the end is near, then each life becomes more precious, each kindness more urgent, each child, each poem, each quiet act of grace more necessary. It could be wrong. Probabilities are not prophecies, but even wrong predictions can offer clarity. Maybe the point is not to fear the end, but to notice the middle, to live with the awareness that stories do end, and that our pages are finite, because whether the end comes in 10 years or 10 million, the truth is the same. We are temporary. We are fleeting. We are caught in a strange and beautiful moment. And the paradox reminds us that knowing this doesn't diminish life, it sharpens it. It makes each breath more vivid, each goodbye more sacred. So sleep now, not in fear, but in softness. Let the stars write their own probabilities. Let time unfold without panic. You are here, that is enough. Let the doomsday argument drift through your dreams, not as an omen, but as a lullaby, a soft whisper in the dark, reminding you that even the end can be gentle. There is a mind that knows everything, every heartbeat, every thought, every particle's path, nothing hidden, nothing unknown. past, present, future, held in a single gaze, unblinking and infinite. This is the idea of omniscience, the totality of knowledge, perfect awareness, a consciousness without limits, without error, without surprise. But in that perfection, a paradox begins to stir. Because if such a mind exists, if it already knows every future decision, then are those decisions still free? If you choose to speak or stay silent, was that choice ever yours, or was it known before you even considered it? To know the future in perfect detail is to see it as fixed, unchanging, set like ink on paper, long before you turn the page. And if the page is already written, can you truly write upon it? This is the paradox of omniscience, a contradiction born not of faith or science, but of time and will. It asks if foreknowledge is compatible with freedom. If prediction becomes predestination, some say yes, that knowledge does not cause the act, that the mind may observe without interfering, that to know a choice is coming does not mean the choice was forced, but others see a deeper problem. If the future can be known with certainty, then it must already exist, and if it already exists, then change is an illusion. Decision is a dream. Freedom, a beautiful fiction. The paradox turns inward. If an omniscient being knows everything, then it must also know its own future. Every word it will speak, every thought it will think. But then, can it change its mind? If it cannot change its mind, then it is bound, trapped by the very knowledge that makes it divine. And if it can change, then it did not truly know. Either way, the infinite mind meets a limit. And that is the heart of the paradox. That knowing all things may cancel the possibility of becoming. That the total map leaves no room for the traveler to walk. Some philosophers say the paradox disappears if we leave time behind. That in a timeless realm, all events simply are. No past, no future, just a vast and silent is. The knower and the known, fused into stillness, but in our world, time flows, choices unfold. We live not in is, but in maybe, in questions, in risks, in doors that can still open or close. And so we ask, can a mind that sees all truly understand what it means to wonder, to hope, to not know? Can it feel surprise, or grief, or awe? Omniscience then becomes not just a power, but a loneliness. To know everything is to stand outside the unfolding, to watch the story, but never be inside it. And yet perhaps there is beauty, even there, a different kind of knowing, one that watches, not with control, but with compassion. Maybe the paradox is not meant to be solved, but held, like a pebble in the hand. A reminder that even the infinite must confront mystery, and as sleep begins to drift around you, let the question rest beside you, not as a weight, but as a gentle presence, a soft echo of a mind too vast to finish and too curious to end. You read a story, the page is still, the ink, unmoving, and yet something stirs. A character speaks, a city rises, a heart breaks, and though none of it is real, you feel it, you grieve, you laugh, you hope for lives that never existed. This is the paradox of fiction. The strange truth that we are moved by what we know is not true, that the unreal can make us cry, that the imaginary can change us. You know the character is invented, their world is drawn from nothing. No breath, no bones, no heartbeat. And yet when they suffer, you suffer. When they triumph, something in you lifts. Philosophers ask how this can be. If belief requires truth, and emotion requires belief, then how can fiction reach us? How can we care for shadows? You do not believe the night is real, or the orphan, or the lost traveler searching the stars. And yet you care. You ache when they fall. You hope when they rise. The logic falters. It says you cannot feel for what you do not believe. And yet every night, millions sit with stories and feel more deeply than they do in waking life. Perhaps the paradox lives in the space between knowing and pretending. You suspend disbelief, but never truly let it go. A part of you knows, and another chooses not to. Some say the emotions are not real, that you are only playing along. that the sorrow for a dying character is not true sorrow, only a softer imitation. But if the tears fall, if the chest tightens, if the mind returns to that moment again and again, then what difference does it make? Others say fiction is a mirror. We feel for ourselves through them, that their stories are vessels for our own. When the hero loses a friend, we remember our own losses. When the journey ends, we think of what we've yet to find. But that does not answer everything. Sometimes we are moved by stories that touch no familiar chord, gripped by lives we've never lived, languages we've never heard, futures we will never see. So the paradox remains. Why do we care? Why do we love the dream? Maybe fiction is a kind of shared hallucination, a ritual where we agree to believe, just a little, just long enough for something true to pass through the lie. Or maybe truth itself is wider than we think. Maybe a thing need not be real to be meaningful. Maybe the imagined has its own kind of gravity. Some believe our minds evolve to find patterns, even in absence, faces in clouds, stories in stars. Perhaps fiction is the natural result of this, a ghost that feels like home. But that does not make it less sacred. If anything, it makes it more. A magic born not of deception, but of collaboration. The reader and the writer, building a world that vanishes when the book closes. And in that vanishing, a quiet beauty, like sand slipping through fingers. Like a dream that fades but leaves its warmth behind. So as you drift now, let the paradox wrap around you like a story half remembered. Let it remind you that what is not real can still be true. And that in a world of fleeting moments, the imagined ones may be the ones that stay longest. A clock ticks in the distance. Soft, steady, inevitable. Somewhere, unseen, a bomb waits, hidden beneath the floorboards of the world. The countdown has begun. No one knows where. No one knows when. Only that it is coming. This is the ticking time bomb paradox. Not a riddle of wires or metal, but of ethics, a question that hums beneath law and logic and never quite resolves. Imagine someone knows where it is. A person, silent, bound by secrecy or belief, and you, holding the question, are asked what must be done to make them speak. The stakes are enormous. A city may vanish, 1,000,000 lives held in the breath of one refusal. You ask gently, you ask again. Time slips away, then comes the paradox. Is it right to cause pain to prevent greater pain? Is it moral to do something wrong, to stop something worse? Can cruelty be justified if it is used to stop catastrophe? Some say yes. They speak of necessity, of outcomes, that if suffering one prevents suffering many, then it becomes a kind of grim mercy. Others recoil. They say morality is not a math equation, that to torture, even for good, is to break something that cannot be mended. And deeper still lies the question of certainty. How sure are you? What if the person is innocent? What if the threat is false? What if the harm becomes a new kind of bomb? The paradox pulls at both ends. Protect the innocent by harming one, or protect your principles by risking everyone. Either path may be right. Either path may destroy you. Some try to solve it with law, to write codes that bend in times of terror. But law is made for light, not shadows, and in the dark rules blur like smoke. Others turn to emotion. They imagine the faces of loved ones and say they would do anything, and maybe they would. But afterward, what would remain if you become the thing you fear to stop the thing you fear? Do you win? The paradox does not live in the bomb. It lives in the silence before it. In the tension between what is right and what is needed, between what is moral and what is human. Because even if the act saves the world, it leaves a mark, a scar on the soul, a quiet crack that never fully heals. And if everyone learns to bend the rules for the greater good, then what becomes of the rules? Some say the time bomb is a thought experiment, that it never happens, that it exists only in the pages of philosophy and fiction. But the choices it mirrors are real. War, interrogation, crisis, all asking the same thing. Do ends justify means? And if we say yes, how far do we go? What do we become? As you drift into sleep, the ticking fades, the bomb vanishes, but the question stays, gentle, heavy, unresolved, and maybe that's where its power lies. Not in the explosion, but in the pause before it. The stillness where morality trembles, and we are asked, quietly, what kind of world we want to live in. You gaze at the night sky, stars scatter across the darkness like thoughts across a dream. Galaxies swirl in silence, and somewhere hidden within this vastness, a question waits, a whisper too big to hold in your hands. How do you measure the infinite? This is the measure problem in cosmology. A paradox that appears not in what we see, but in how we try to count what we cannot. Modern theories suggest our universe may be just one of many, an endless multiverse, bubbling with variations, different constants, different outcomes, an eternal fabric where everything that can happen does, somewhere. If the cosmos is infinite, then it contains infinite stars, infinite planets, infinite versions of you, laughing, sleeping, forgetting, remembering. So when we try to ask a simple question, how likely is something, we are met with silence. Because when everything happens an infinite number of times, how can we say what is rare? In our world, probability is clear. Flip a coin, half the time it lands heads, half tails. But in the multiverse, every outcome happens infinitely. Heads forever, tails forever. Everything, again and again. So which infinity counts more? That is the heart of the measure problem. A question of comparisons, not of things, but of infinities. Which outcomes matter most when all of them happen endlessly? Some suggest we must apply a cutoff, look only at a portion of the multiverse, measure there, then expand. But depending how and where you cut, you get different answers, different predictions, different meanings. It's like slicing a cloud and expecting it to behave like stone. Infinity resists measurement. It bends the tools used to tame it. Others try to define a measure based on observers, count how many beings witness an event. But then we must ask, what counts as an observer, a galaxy, a thought, a moment of awareness, and still the paradox deepens. Because if observers are infinite too, then so are their contradictions. In one world, the sun explodes. In another, it cools into peace, and both are true, forever. The problem is not just mathematical, it is existential. If everything happens, why does this version of reality feel so specific, so personal? Why this body, this breath, this dream? The measure problem echoes into questions of consciousness, identity, and fate. Are we statistical noise in an eternal field, or are we a thread woven with intention? Some cosmologists believe the problem will be solved with new physics, a deeper theory, a grander frame. But others suspect it is a limit of language itself, that infinity cannot be compared, only witnessed, and so we return to the sky. The stars do not count themselves, they do not ask what is probable, they simply shine, quiet, indifferent, eternal. Let the paradox settle around you like nightfall. Let it remind you that not all questions lead to answers, some are invitations to wonder, and in the end, perhaps the measure of the universe is not how often something occurs, but how deeply it is felt. Even in an infinite sea of possibilities, this moment is still yours. A star collapses under its own weight, light bends inward, space folds, time slows, and at the center something strange is born, a black hole. A mouth in the fabric of reality that swallows everything, even memory. Nothing escapes, not light, not matter, not even the whispers of what once was. It is gone, irretrievable, erased, but physics does not like erasure. It prefers balance, input and output, cause and effect. Every particle, every moment should leave a trace, a record etched into the unfolding of the universe. This is where the paradox begins. The black hole information paradox asks a simple, terrifying question. What happens to information when it falls into a black hole? Not just objects, not just mass, but the patterns, the identities, the arrangements of what those things once were. the code of existence itself. Stephen Hawking showed that black holes are not eternal. They leak energy through what we now call Hawking radiation. And over time, they evaporate, slowly, quietly, until nothing remains. But the radiation is random, featureless, like static from a dying signal. It tells us nothing about what was lost. No clue of the star, the planet, the thought, the dream that fell inside. And yet, according to quantum mechanics, information cannot be destroyed. It is a law more sacred than gravity. The universe must remember, so which law breaks? Does information disappear forever, violating quantum rules? Or is it somehow preserved, hidden in ways we cannot yet see? This is the paradox, a war between two pillars of physics, general relativity and quantum mechanics, both true, both in conflict. Some theories suggest the information is smeared across the surface of the black hole, encoded in the event horizon, like a cosmic hologram, a shell of memory at the edge of silence. Others imagine the radiation itself is not random, that subtle patterns ripple through it, clues, faint as starlight, that carry the essence of what was lost. And some whisper of firewalls, violent boundaries at the edge of black holes that shatter our understanding of space, time, and self. But no answer is complete. Every theory leaves something behind, a contradiction, a puzzle, a scar. The black hole information paradox is not just about physics, it is about forgetting, about whether the universe is a place where things can truly vanish. If information can be lost, then what of us? Are our lives permanent in the fabric of time, or can we be swallowed and forgotten by the dark? Sleep now beneath the weight of galaxies. Let the paradox drift through you like gravity, through a dream. Not to be solved, but to be carried. Because even if the answers fall into silence, the questions still glow, and somewhere beyond the edge of understanding, the universe remembers. You try to count the stars, 1, 2, 3, but the numbers stretch, the sky does not end. You lose track, your voice fades, and still, the stars remain. Infinite, unreachable, silent. This is where the paradox of infinity begins, in a place too large to hold, too strange to understand. Infinity is not just a big number, it is not distance or size, it is the absence of limit. A concept that grows without end. No matter how far you go, you add 1 to infinity. You still have infinity. You double it, it remains the same. You subtract 1,000,000, it does not change. Infinity swallows all difference. In the real world, nothing behaves like this. Mountains have edges, oceans have shores. But in the world of thought, infinity unfolds endlessly, and yet not all infinities are equal. Some are larger than others. The set of all whole numbers is infinite. So is the set of all real numbers between 0 and 1. But the second is more infinite. That's the paradox. You can compare infinities, measure the immeasurable, divide the indivisible. You can even create an infinite hotel full of infinite guests and still make room for more. Hilbert's hotel, a thought experiment where every room is taken, yet space remains. Move each guest to the next room, and suddenly the first is free. Infinity dances, bends, and never breaks. Infinity breaks our rules. It mocks arithmetic, it laughs at logic, and yet it forms the skeleton of space, the breath of time, the edges of reality. In math, it is useful. In physics, it becomes dangerous. Equations explode when infinities appear. Energy climbs too high, gravity tears apart. Reality itself begins to unravel, so scientists cut it off. They renormalize. They round infinity into something manageable. A polite fiction to keep the universe stable. But still, infinity lurks. In black holes, in the edges of time, in the endless expansion of the cosmos. And if the universe is infinite, then everything that can happen must happen. Somewhere you are dreaming, somewhere else you are awake. Another you, another story, again and again forever. It comforts some, it terrifies others. A reality without border, a self without anchor, a loop that never closes. Infinity also lives in the small. Divide a number in half, then divide the half. Keep going. There is always more, smaller and smaller. No bottom, no final grain, only the illusion of ending. So is the world continuous, or made of tiny steps? Does it stretch forever, or tick forward like frames of a film? Infinity hides inside both questions. It asks us to hold contradictions, to believe in something that cannot be reached, yet cannot be avoided. Maybe that's why it feels so heavy, so beautiful, like standing at the edge of a dream and never waking up. As you fall asleep, let infinity hold you, not as a number, but as a feeling, endless breath, endless stars, endless softness, and in that space without edge, you do not need to understand. You only need to drift. You sit quietly, looking around at the world you know. The walls, the objects, the people, everything feels solid, real, and familiar. But what if this reality is not as it seems? What if your mind is simply running a simulation, a projection of something much larger, beyond your own awareness? This is the heart of the simulation theory of mind. Simulation theory suggests that everything you experience, everything you perceive, might not be real in the way you think it is. Instead, it could be a simulation, a model created by your mind to interpret and navigate the world. Your thoughts, your perceptions, your sense of self, what if they are just projections, simulations created by a deeper system? In this view, the mind is not a passive observer, but an active participant in creating the reality you experience. Rather than being a reflection of a fixed external world, your consciousness is a model, a simulation that makes sense of the raw data your senses receive. The you know might not be the true self, but an avatar within a much larger construct. Imagine for a moment that everything you experience, the feelings, the thoughts, the events, are all part of an elaborate simulation. Your mind runs a program that constructs reality in real time, based on the data it receives. The world, the people, even your sense of self, might simply be constructs within this grand simulation, created to help you navigate existence. This idea forces us to rethink the nature of consciousness and identity. If our mind is running a simulation, then our perception of reality is not an accurate representation of the world. It is, instead, a model, a set of probabilities and projections created to make sense of the world in a way that allows us to function within it. In simulation theory, identity is not something that exists independently, but is a construct within the simulation itself. You are not a fixed, isolated entity, but a character within a program, playing a role in a reality that is itself an illusion. The self you know is just an avatar, created by the system that runs your consciousness. This perspective challenges everything we know about reality and the self. If our minds are simply running a simulation, then who are we really? Are we the mind that creates the simulation, or are we merely a part of it? The boundaries of identity blur, and what we once thought of as a stable sense of self becomes a fleeting, malleable construct. The simulation theory of mind also suggests that our consciousness is limited by the parameters of the simulation itself. What we perceive as reality is only a small fraction of what actually exists. Our minds, constrained by the simulation, cannot perceive the true nature of the world outside it. We live within a model, a representation of something much larger. If this is true, then the self becomes even more elusive. You are not defined by a fixed set of characteristics, but by the simulation that runs in your mind. Your thoughts, your desires, your memories, everything you experience is a projection, a construction within the program. Your sense of self is not an inherent truth, but an artifact of the simulation. The beauty of simulation theory is that it frees us from the burden of a fixed, unchanging identity. If we are simply avatars in a simulation, then identity is not a destination, but a fluid experience. You can change, evolve, and adapt within the parameters of the simulation. The you know is always in flux, always subject to the shifting program of the mind. In this view, identity is not a singular, permanent thing. It is an experience, a story told by the simulation that runs in your mind. Each moment is a new set of experiences, a new configuration of data, and the self is simply the construct that emerges from this ever-changing flow of information. Simulation theory also invites us to question the nature of free will. If we are characters in a simulation, are we truly in control of our actions, or are they predetermined by the parameters of the simulation? Are we the authors of our own stories, or are we simply following a script written by a larger, unseen force? Consider the way you make decisions. When you choose something, is it truly your choice, or is it the result of the program running in your mind? Perhaps your sense of free will is simply another projection within the simulation, a construct designed to make you feel as if you are in control, even though your actions are guided by a deeper system. This understanding of identity also forces us to reflect on the nature of reality itself. If everything we experience is part of a simulation, then what is the real world beyond it? Are we living in a constructed reality, or is there something beyond our perceptions, something we cannot access because our minds are limited by the simulation we inhabit? The simulation theory of mind suggests that the world you know is not as it seems. It is a construct, a projection designed to help you make sense of existence. But this does not mean that your experiences are meaningless. They are real within the context of the simulation. The world you live in is real to you, even if it is an illusion within a larger system. In the end, the simulation theory asks us to embrace the fluidity of identity and the impermanence of reality. If the mind is running a simulation, then who you are is not fixed, but a dynamic process, an avatar moving through a world of projections. Your sense of self is not the truth of who you are, but a part of the illusion you navigate each day. And so, as you drift into sleep, consider the possibility that your sense of self is not as solid as you think. The world, your mind, and even your identity might be nothing more than a projection, a simulation of something far beyond your understanding. Perhaps, in the end, identity is simply a dream within a larger dream.